Hello and welcome to Rewind Reviews. You know what, Chris? Can I do that again? I felt that was weak. That was like a week. Like I went into it like, hello and welcome to Rewind Reviews. Like there was a very false energy to it. I'm gonna do it again.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, and I'm hello. No, I'm kidding. That'd be amazing. Just go the exact opposite way. No, I'm gonna find that middle. This Goldilocks is about to find an intro that's just right. Wait. Jesus Christ, what's wrong with me? It's too early for this. All right, try it.
That's my theory.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to Rewind Reviews. I was in my head, but it's fine. I guess this is all going good. This is the Danny Says TV podcast. This is the podcast where we look at movies from our youth and ask the age-old question: are they any good? Now, you've probably seen the title of the podcast you're listening to and already know that the answer is no. It isn't any good. That's fine. We'll get to it. That was anticipated. We're not. I don't think either of us went into this going, maybe on a rewatch. This will be this much lauded film will be a classic. But let's see if we can figure out why this is.
Yeah, I didn't. And first of all, a little pre-warning. The room I'm in is being redecorated, so it's a little echoey. Apologies if that's irritating for people. I'm trying to talk in a way to make it less echoey, but it is still pretty echoey. So apologies for that. Normal business will resume hopefully next episode, if not the episode after.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, echoey room, redecorating.
I tell you what,
Chris's life moves on, folks. What are you gonna do about it?
Yeah, back off, guys.
Yeah, chill out.
You know what? I didn't expect a classic, but I was hoping for harmless fun.
Yeah.
And it is bad, but there's some elements of it. There's some set pieces that are trying, aren't there?
Are they?
Yeah.
Which one? I don't want to immediately. We'll do history and all the usual. Just to pick up on that. Just right out of the gate. Which one?
The bridge moving. He doesn't need to move the bridge. It seems a bit excessive, but as a plot point. But in terms of effects and stuff, there's some stuff in the final fight that's trying and pretty cool.
So what? Where someone does a punch and then says a quip, and then someone else does a punch and says a quip. Good is it?
The beast going beast mode and sort of
I guess
attacking people is cool.
Yeah, and I guess that's probably more beast, like more classic comic book Beast than what we got with Nicholas Holt's Beast, who was deliberately a different sort of interpretation. Look, I didn't like it then. I don't like it now. History with the film, which we usually do on this podcast before we get into the full review, is pretty simple. I saw it in the cinema with friends. We all went really excited because we'd enjoyed X2, which we talked about last week. And then we all came out pretty much with the same view. And typical teenage boy, that was shit. Did we have any further discussion about why? Not really. No, none of us liked it. So, and I can't imagine I've sat through it since. Until this, because I really, really didn't like it. And I will say, just to full disclosure, just a little disclaimer here, this is a very unusual rewind review, and you guys will have to hold me account. It's been a while since I saw this film, because basically this podcast got cancelled twice. Or postponed twice, this recording. Once by Chris, once by me, because we're both useless. And I want to make it very clear that my absolute intention was to re-watch the film prior to today, because when I actually watched it was 18 days ago, but it was so bad, I genuinely could not stomach watching it a second time. So I settled for watching, like sort of thumbing through it last night, just reminding myself of a few key scenes, going back through my notes to make sure I understood everything I'd written 18 days ago. And obviously I did the trivia, which forced me to remember much of the movie. Now, if I do misremember any small details, I'm sure Chris will pick me up on that. And I don't mean that in a he'll be pedantic way. I mean, I hope he will, because I'm assuming Chris, who's an absolute legend, who also saw it before the second attempt to record this about a week ago. I'm assuming you've watched it again since, because you're a champion.
Yeah, but I'm not sure how much I took it in the second time. It's not a good movie.
No, it's a bad
but
movie.
Yes, I did attempt. But I think
do you have history with this film?
Problem.
Do you have history with this film?
No, I've never seen it. My biggest history with this film is I remember seeing an interview with, I think, Halle Berry and Hugh Jackman on Jonathan Ross, and they showed a trailer and stuff, and I was like, oh, the only thought I really remember thinking was like, oh, it's quite cool that they're like, this is the end and da-da-da. But equally, it seems pretty successful. There's only been 3 films. Maybe that's a bit short-sighted. Like, I remember thinking that even then. Mm-hmm. So no history. I was actually quite excited to watch it because I know how people don't like it. I know how it's not very popular. And I've never seen it, so I was intrigued to see how it plays out.
Mm. So, I mean, look, I'll just start in terms of overall review, overall thoughts. We're not recommending, I don't think. Chris might, I don't know, but I doubt it.
No.
The reality of this movie is, I mean, it's an hour and a half of stuff happening, and I really just wished it would stop happening. The movie would stop happening. This movie sort of happens to you. It's like a crime and you feel like the victim. Like, you can't control it and you've just got to let it happen. Like, you just nothing you can do. It is the filmmaking equivalent to being hit round the head. It's like, okay, why try to do the definitive Scott Summers and Jean Grey story, Dark Phoenix, with neither Scott Summers or mostly without Jean Grey, who pretty much disappears from this movie's third act. It's like, my overall thought is the lack of understanding of the characters in this is so insane that it doesn't even matter if they had, which they don't, have gotten the action right, or the visuals right, or the other stuff right, because the fundamental understanding of this story is so poor. And there's no understanding of any story that they're actually intending to tell. It's just a sequence of events that are vaguely X-Men themed. It's really fucking bad. I don't know. Have you got any overall thoughts, Chris, on any of those notes?
The problem is it just feels off from the beginning, and it never. My 2 big things with it was like the fake out apocalyptic future scene where there's
danger room scene,
seemingly, as far as I can tell, throwing in reference to the Days of Future Past comic, like the Sentinels and all that sort of shit. Mm-hmm. Just a cock tease, because it's really weird to me that you would have Sentinels in that, but then not Sentinels in in the future. So, like, in the movie, like, it's just weird. Okay, fine. It was just stuff in that was so, like, the explosion going off behind Wolverine, and it just felt too quippy, and it didn't feel at all in line with the tone of the first 2 movies, and it just threw me off, and I just felt really like, oh, something's really off here. Yeah. And then the problem is the movie is just simply trying to do too much.
Yes.
It's got Angel in there for like 5 minutes across the film, so we never really explore that. Mm. It's got Rogue and Bobby, but we never really explore that. It's got Wolverine and Jean, but we never really actually explore that. Like, there's not the time to assess what any character needs or wants or anything like that. It's just not well executed.
We're very on the same page with this, Chris, because I have 2 little sections to my notes. I have the notes as the film goes on, so there are details about specific scenes as they're happening, and then at the top I've got sort of a more overall thought. So if I think of any thought that covers the whole movie, I put that at the top, so we can cover them at the top when I organise my notes. I just want to read you my top 2 notes, Chris, and see if these sound familiar to you. Tone, too light and jokey, too much banter and posing during the action. Point 2, characters, way too many with nothing to do, Jean, Angel, Rogue, ... Is that not exactly what you just said?
Yeah, completely.
So we clearly experienced the same problems here. Between that, I also wrote my fourth note down, but there's another one in between. But my fourth note down is more plot than it can hold. So yeah, we are very aligned on this.
And what's annoying is, at the heart of it, I don't know the Dark Phoenix comic well enough, but that all looked in, and I get the feeling this is very much not that comic.
Correct.
But there's still interesting ideas there. Jean is so powerful, split personality, all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. That's interesting. That's an interesting idea. The cure for mutants, and is it right to enforce it? Is it right to use it as a weapon? There are some mutants like Storm that are saying we don't need to be cured. There are some mutants like Rogue that are saying, well, hold on, my power I don't see as a good thing. It's interesting. There's a lot of interesting ideas here. None of them are given the time. And it's such a shame because actually it's exploring some really interesting themes. It's just not doing it well because it's just fundamentally trying to do too much.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that none of them are given the time is a good way to describe it, but the end effect is that none of them feel like they're explored because of that lack of time. So it's like, don't put the idea in if you're not going to then generate drama from it. Do you know what I mean? Like why kill so many characters in ways that feel frivolous and don't give us any ability to actually tell story as a result of that? Scott's death, Professor X's death, just sort of happen because the movie is sort of happening. It's what I said right at the beginning. This movie just sort of happens to you. And I think, when you're making decisions in a script, it all should be what's going to enhance the drama. What am I going to then be able to squeeze some exciting stories and scenes out of? And if you're making choices like we're going to kill these characters or we're going to include these two plot lines, these two iconic X-Men plot lines, a more modern iconic X-Men plot line from Gifted, from Joss Whedon's run, which I actually reread for this podcast. And I don't think it really informed my thoughts on this movie because there's so little of what's good about that comic in this movie, but I'm glad I read it because I was like, oh yeah, that's how storytelling should function. This is how you make that dramatic and interesting. And I, and with the Dark Phoenix plot again, it's like so many half ideas, and there are things in here that could then go to something else, but they don't. They're only ever as interesting as the scene that they're in, and they're never really gone back to. It's not a movie that then it takes advantage of the choices it's making, and it's like, why make those choices if you're not going to tell story with them? I just don't understand. The choice to have Jean kill Scott is actually it's not the traditional version of this story, but it's interesting because it's a person that's got these split personalities, and one of them just murdered the other one's boyfriend. That should cause some interesting internal struggle. But instead, she then spends the rest of the movie standing stoically behind Magneto until she gets shish kebabbed right at the end of the movie. What are we doing? Why do that then? And I know there are reasons. I know there are production reasons why some of these choices were made, and we'll get to that. But I'm saying, if we're just reviewing this movie as a movie and not taking into account the reason some of the choices were made, such as James Marsden simply not being available, the reality is that if you go back a step before that, hey, guess what? Don't put that story in then. If he's not available, don't choose to do the Dark Phoenix story. Don't do that. Leave her dead for a movie. You can bring her back later.
But or like you say, have Jean Grey grapple with that guilt.
Right.
Let's not spend so much of because to me, my interpretation when you say Jean Grey's hardly in the movie isn't the actress, isn't the character. It's the fact that we're doing a story about dual personality and we're only seeing one personality, and it's the Phoenix. So let's see Jean Grey. Let's have every time we go back to Jean Grey, she's distraught and can't believe she's killed Cyclops. Let's do something with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And it's and you can apply that to so many elements of this film story. Here's an interesting idea. It's gone. Next scene. It'll never be referenced again. Here's an interesting idea. it's just going to be plot relevant. It's not going to be character relevant. Like it's just a series of scenes strung together. Let's get into some of the nitty gritty then. Yeah, I mean, I guess we've already covered some of the like. Actually, no, let's see if we can dig out some positives before we get any further, because I feel like we've done a lot of ragging on the movie. I don't think the visuals are the worst, but the action on the page isn't exciting enough to do anything with, because clearly what was written on the page was he shoots a guy with a laser, or he punches a guy, or he throws a spike at a guy, and then that was just copied and pasted throughout the script and counted as action. The action scenes aren't particularly exciting in my view, but it's not actually the visuals. The visuals are, and look, don't get me wrong, the visuals aren't like, this isn't cinema. This isn't Chef's Kiss cinema sort of thing. This isn't like Oscar-worthy sort of cinematography. But this is functional cinematography that's shot in a way that you understand what's happening in front of you the whole time, and the visual effects are pretty impressive. There's actually a really impressive de-aging effect in this movie. But, I mean, that's the closest I can come to a compliment that's valid, is like, it's shot competently, I guess. I never saw a shot that I was like, that's the wrong shot, or that looks bad, or anything like that I can think of.
I would say two compliments I'd pay is, again, it is full of interesting ideas. Like, we've named a bunch, and there are ones we've still not named. Right. Magneto and Charles, and Magneto witnessing, spoilers, like, from here on out, Magneto witnessing Charles's death. We don't do anything with it, but it's an interesting idea. Magneto's rejection of Mephisto. How do you say her name? Mystique. Sorry, Mystique.
There is a character in the Marvel universe called Mephisto or Mephisto.
Yeah, I think that's why I was getting confused. His rejection of Mystique is phenomenal. Again, they don't really do anything with it, other than some weird, shitty, woman scorned gag. But, that idea has depth and would be interesting to explore. So I think it's got a lot of interesting ideas, and I think it takes a lot of big swings. And I think most of this is legacy.
I was just about to say that a lot of these good ideas are just because they're adapting comics that were good, and like the ideas have come over as a result of the transfer rather than a deliberate choice to make good choices for this script. But I take your point though. You're right. They're in the movie. If we're judging the movie, the ideas are in the movie, so they do count.
Yeah, and I think the other compliment, which is the legacy thing, was the beginning of this sentence, and I think this is legacy, but. The casting continues to be perfect, and the additions here are perfect. Kelsey Grammer's portrayal of Beast is amazing.
Elliot Page is a perfect Shadowcat, the best Kitty Pryde. Even when I was younger, I understood that they cast Kitty Pryde perfectly, and ironically, the reason Elliot Page got this job was because of a movie called Hard Candy, and that's the only movie I knew Elliot Page from. And when I remember sitting down to watch this movie at the cinema, being excited at that casting because I'd seen Hard Candy also, not even the year before, like 6 to 12 months before. Like it wasn't that long ago, and it was so good. And I remember, as a fan of the comics, just thinking they nailed that so perfectly. Kitty she's an amazing character. And I should clarify before anyone, just in case anyone's going to be shitty about this. Kitty Pryde, the character, has she, her pronouns. When I'm talking about the character, I will use she, her. Just before anyone goes, it's not she, her anymore. I understand. The actor, Elliot Page, no longer uses those pronouns. The character is still she. I just want to get ahead of that before I get it in the deck.
But I think the fact that you called them Elliot Page, and that shows respect and we're trying here.
It hadn't occurred to me that I'd need to cover that, but anyway. But I just literally it's almost the closest they come to understanding the character of Kitty Pryde is casting Elliot Page, and then every other decision made less so. In my opinion,
honestly, it's one of the best. And I would even say, the Avengers are all cast brilliantly, but this is such a big ensemble by this point.
Yeah,
and everyone is cast brilliantly. And the reason I honestly think, because, X2 is considered a classic, X-Men 1 is great, but, we thought there were personally flaws with X2. There are definitely flaws with this film. But think how many movies they made from this fucking franchise, and a big part of that is the charm of the cast and the excitement for the cast. So yeah, I think the casting continues to be brilliant in this movie.
And I don't even hate, and I know people are going to give me shit for this, I don't hate Vinnie Jones as a choice for Juggernaut. This interpretation of Juggernaut is dreadful. Don't get me wrong, it's one of the worst parts of the movie, but Vinnie Jones as a choice to play Juggernaut is not a problem at all. In fact, it's kind of inspired. I think that's kind of a genius choice. Just doesn't work out because this is a really bad interpretation of that character.
And yes, the meme is stupid, but partly because I know it as a meme. But actually, I don't know, I don't have the context of what Juggernaut as a character should be. But the Juggernaut chasing Kitty through the walls was quite fun.
Honestly,
I thought that was fun.
When earlier I sort of we were talking about action scenes that had worked, and I was like sort of saying what worked. I'm curious. Like, can you think of it? The only one I could think of that I was like even remotely sort of excited by or thought was even remotely interesting was Kitty Pryde, Juggernaut. That sort of like David Goliath-esque, overcome the odds situation. You've got to outsmart your opponent because they are physically your superior in every conceivable way. It's a good scene, and it's executed well. The way Kitty uses her powers to avoid Juggernaut in that sequence is pretty clever and is one of the more exciting scenes in the whole movie, in my opinion. So yeah, I don't like this interpretation of Juggernaut at all in terms of like how he looks, the way he talks, just so many bad choices. But like Vinnie Jones as a casting choice is fine. Or fine to good, depending on your perspective, I suppose. Ben Foster's great as Angel. Dinah Ramirez is great as Callisto. Like this movie, like the last ones, is just perfectly cast top to bottom, like top to bottom. It's a really well cast movie. We haven't even, I don't think we've even mentioned the biggest one, which is just like, if there was ever a man born for a role, Kelsey Grammer was born to play Hank McCoy. He just was. It's the same way that Patrick Stewart looked at the front cover of an X-Men comic and said, "Why am I on the front cover of this comic?" Kelsey Grammer might as well have been born with blue fur himself. It's so
and
good.
I was watching the film going, at some point, presumably Beast is going to try and kick ass. Is it going to work as well then? And it absolutely does. Like I said earlier, I think it's one of the strongest elements of the action scene at the end. All the stuff with Beast. So yeah, just perfect casting. And I would pay that as a big compliment to the movie.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree with you. Let's start with some of the more specifics then. Well, so first of all, from the perspective of Dark Phoenix. Now, it's been a long time since I've read the Dark Phoenix saga. It's is for a reason. It's a really long sort of run of comics. It went over multiple arcs over a pretty large period of time, because that was in that period. If memory serves, it's probably not too far from when Spider-Man comics were doing the Clone Saga, which was again a multi-year ongoing story that just engulfed the entire comic for a huge portion of its run. And these days you would do it in 6 to 12 issues maybe, whereas back then it was like, here, have 3 years worth of comics and spin-offs on this one idea. But my memory of the Dark Phoenix saga, and I think one of the reasons it's always going to be a tricky story to develop, is that it does happen alongside lots of other things going on. So in theory, that story would be best told across 3 or 4 films, where you're getting a portion of that story in each movie and then paying it off in the last one, right? Cramming it in here in this half-hearted way without one of the key components of that story, Cyclops, it will never not be one of the maddest choices. It's like the last movie ended with Jean dying, so they just felt they had to do it. Like, even though it did not work for this script at all. And I just think, like, there's the weird stubbornness of pushing ahead with that when it could just be... Why couldn't it just be Jean's dead, and at the end of this movie, she comes back to set up the fourth? They were making more of these movies. They were simultaneously developing X-Men Origins Wolverine with this. So this nonsense of this is the final one, this is the end of the trilogy, was a marketing spin because they all knew it was a piece of shit and they weren't doing it again. The reality of the production of this movie, though, is like, at what point do you just call it quits on the Phoenix for this movie and go, we don't have Marsden. We're going to have to contrive a reason to bring Jean back so soon. We're going to have to do this. We're going to have to do that. It's going to, we're not going to get to do the most exciting part of this story. Let's just save it. We'll save it and give it a whole movie. Jean can just be not in this one, and it can be a big dramatic thing at the end of this one that she comes back, and then that sets us up for the Dark Phoenix movie, the next movie, and we'll do Gifted. We'll do Gifted properly. Instead, it's like two movies just smushed together, two stories just smushed together in a way that just hurts both of them so significantly. Again, Gifted, full of brilliant ideas. None of them appear in this film, and I just feel like the movie was immediately kneecapped by that choice, that one simple choice right up top. These are the two comics we're going to adapt, and the stubbornness to do that in the face of, because okay, try it. Think, I think we can balance both. You look at that script. Who looked at that script and went, yeah, this works? Like, I don't understand who looked at that script and thought that was a functional story of any kind. Melting my brain every single time I think of it. I don't know. So, how did you feel watching it because you've never seen this movie? Did you know that Scott has like 4 or 5 minutes of screen time and then dies unceremoniously?
No, and he doesn't even sort of... There's no body.
So he doesn't even die on screen, does he? He's sort of like, he's there with Jean, we cut away, and then later on someone's like, Scott's dead.
Yeah, so I did spend a little bit of time going, is he actually dead?
Right.
Because we didn't see him on screen.
Another failure of the script, but yeah, go on.
And I was slightly confused by the logistics of the thing that killed Scott also happens to Wolverine later, and he doesn't die, and obviously he's got regenerative powers,
right.
and that's why. But
yes,
still, it was just clunky. It was just clunky, but that's the beginning of every fucker getting killed off unceremoniously. So it's like,
because even like Mystique's like loss of power and then being abandoned, which is as a scene in of itself is great, is sort of a death because that character literally never shows up again.
She is there to give. She gives their location or some shit like that.
Okay.
She doesn't have dialogue. She's just, they know where they are or they know something, and someone's like, "How do we find out this?" And we cut to her handing it over, and one of them makes a shitty comment about a woman scorned. I don't think it is that phrase, but it's some shit. No,
the woman scorned. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. What's the horrible line when he first abandons her?
Isn't it something like, "You were so pretty" or something shit?
Yeah, it was like, "She was so beautiful" or something like that. Yeah, it was. Oh, what a bad piece of dialogue. Jesus Christ. Let's talk about my biggest problem with this script, Chris, because we've not even touched my biggest issue, and I'm going to get this out before I... Oh, I've got the line here. It was, okay. I wrote down, Magneto rescues Mystique. It's a great scene. I like the choice of Magneto to leave, but the dialogue, woof. And I wrote, "You're not one of us anymore." And then, "Such a shame, she was so beautiful."
Jesus.
Weird.
So bad.
It's not great. Let me talk about my biggest problem with this movie, because would you believe it, Chris? All the issues we've listed, none of them are actually my biggest issue with this movie, because not executing on your ideas is one thing, but fundamentally fucking up one of the most clean, clear, crystallized characters from pop culture and their beliefs and their attitudes so strongly is literally unforgivable because it just makes you feel like they didn't understand at all what they were doing. And that is Professor X. So first of all, he gets Professor X'd in record time, and by Professor X'd, we're referring to the act of removing the powerful character from the story via some sort of MacGuffin or death, so that they can't help out in the final act. In this movie, he gets Professor X'd 48 minutes into this one, but this is a mercy because he's written so poorly in this movie. I cannot tell you. Right, so we'll start with the simplest one. He's mad at Wolverine for releasing Jean / the Phoenix when he was the one who was like, I don't have to explain myself to anyone, least of all you. Who is that talking? Because that ain't Professor X. Who's that? Who's that character you've written? Because that, like, someone must have, like, the pages must have got jumbled and someone must have thought that was dialogue from Professor X's mouth. Like some production assistant, and then someone filmed it without realizing. Because there's no way that was fucking written by a human being with a brain in their head for Professor X. I'm sorry. What? But then there's the fucking backwards morality of this movie. Now, some would argue, right, that the hypocrisy of Professor X in this movie is by design. But if it's by design, then killing him is an even worse decision in the middle of the movie, because then you can't actually explore that at all. The movie can't ever challenge it, because it's one thing to make a good character make some bad choices and then learn from them, but if you kill them, then they don't get to learn from them, or they don't get to see consequences for their choices and see the error of their ways in any way, shape, or form, or at least the movie can't call them out for their bullshit, right? The lack of understanding of Charles in this movie is insane. So for the idea that he suppressed Jean for all these years is mental. And the reason that hypocrisy is in this script is because I think they were a bit too scared to explain Jean the way that she's explained in the comics, which is that there is a cosmic entity inside of her, right? Instead, it's no, she's too powerful, I've had to hold her back. Insane. Like, actually insane. The idea that he's been using his powers to suppress a part of another human being when everyone else he's taught how to live and work with their powers, that's been his whole thing, is insane to me. Absolutely insane. I will never understand those choices for as long as I live. And they are unforgivable.
But also I really noticed it in the entire scene between him and Logan, where he's like scorning Logan for, I can't remember if it's bringing her back or whatever, but it's and he's such a dick to Logan. Like, I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, this doesn't feel like Professor X at all.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know, it's like the writers were like, I don't know, high or something. I don't understand. And the movie's morality is all over the place in general, because again, at the end of the movie, after all of this fighting for the right to not be told by someone else that you have to have your powers taken away from you because you're a threat, how do they stop Magneto? How do the heroes of this story stop the villain? They shoot him with the cure. By choice. Are you fucking kidding me? Is that real? That's the movie? That's the choice we made? We just did a whole movie of everyone being like, the cure is bad, no one should get to make those choices for us but us. The government say that it's because we're dangerous, but, you know, that's just not how the world works. You know, we're doing this the wrong way. This is bad. Bad government, bad subjugation, blah, blah, blah. But it's fine with Magneto. We'll cure him up. We'll give him the cure. We'll stop him. He's bad, though. He's dangerous. We've decided that.
It's like the script is looking for an easy end. Do you know what I mean? An easy, quick end, because they didn't know how else to end it.
Yeah, and look, and you feel the writer sort of knowing that's the incorrect decision, because obviously the post-credits scene, one of two post-credit scenes, shows Magneto's powers not quite gone, which is a smart choice, because it shows the cure wasn't quite as permanent as they thought, and it also gives us some leeway on the rogue of it all. Because I'm pretty sure. Okay, and it's 18 days ago, so I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna have to nudge Chris on this one. Does Rogue take the cure in the end? She has it, right?
Yeah, she has it. She takes it.
Yeah, right. So Rogue takes the cure, and I guess by showing Magneto's powers are slowly coming back with the scene, the chess sequence, as we'll call it, from the post credits. We're implying the cure isn't permanent, therefore Rogue also would theoretically get her powers back at a later time, right? Whether she wants them or not, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. But again, we don't want to talk about fundamentally misunderstanding a character. Yeah, Rogue.
Just sidelined again, it's mad.
Yeah, but also I think I just don't believe her choice to take the cure. I don't think they do enough to convince me she'd do that.
No, and I think it's such a shame because they try and again, it's the writers trying to get around it. They have her say at the end, "It's what I wanted," and that's them trying to address the really good scene between her and Wolverine, where he's like, "Look, I'm not your dad. You could do what you want. Just don't do this for a boy. Don't make the decision for the wrong reasons," essentially, is what he said.
One of my favourite scenes in the whole movie, actually. If we're doing positives,
it's a great scene.
That scene between those two feels like it's straight out of a script from the first two movies. It's really solid.
It's a brilliant scene, and it's undone by the movie not then doing enough to make you feel like it is like she is doing it for herself, that she is doing it for her reasons.
Because this movie thinks that one stray line of dialogue is enough to do that work instead of just giving us scenes that show us that.
Yeah, and let's see a scene between Rogue and Bobby where Bobby's like Iceman, whatever he's called, is like I don't want you to do this. And she's still wrestling with it then because she knows that she wants to. If you're going to do that. But...
Or show a scene after she's had the cure where Bobby goes to touch her and she's like, "Oh no, we're done. This wasn't for you, this is for me, but we're done." Which I think probably might have been in the script but was taken out because they also took out... so apparently Bobby kissed Shadowcat on the lake in the original sort of script and in the filmed version. They just snipped it. So I guess the idea was that she was done with him because he kissed her. But if you take that out, you can't then have the subsequent scene. Sorry, go on.
I bet you, I don't know if this is true, but I am willing to bet that they didn't fucking know what they were going to do with it. And I reckon that scene in the bedroom where she's like, "I took it for me," and then they hold hands, I reckon they shot that twice. And in one version, she took it, and in one version, she didn't take it.
Yeah,
and they didn't know what the fuck they were going to use. I would bet there are two versions of that scene filmed.
Yeah, I would agree.
I'm looking it up.
Okay, well, we're on Iceman. Let's talk about Iceman briefly. Look, right. First of all, Iceman and Pyro's fight, which I was super excited for. Those two characters obviously were friends. They ended up on different sides. And we should talk about anticipation, really, because I do think a lot of the immediate reaction to this movie back in the day was also, not only does the movie not stand up on its own 2 feet as a movie in isolation, I just don't think it functions. There was also the real kiss of death, expectation. The trailers set up, there were way more X-Men now. We got Beast, and we got Iceman, and we got this, and we got that, and all the guys from the old movies are here, and all of this, and that's going to be this huge epic fight, right? And Iceman, Iceman's going to come to blows with Pyro, right? And that's what I wanted. I went into this movie really excited to see fire and ice come together in a big battle, right? Not only is it the most boring, fucking dreadful beam clash I've ever seen in my life. Just shoot beams at each other until someone beams hardest, I guess. Right? Which is just abysmal. Just actually abysmal. Iceman, they half pull the trigger. Iceman gets his full iconic Iceman look, but we only see it for 10 seconds. And he doesn't do the most iconic thing Iceman does in that form. Chris, have you got a computer in front of you of any kind, or a phone or something?
Mm-hmm.
Just Google Iceman, X-Men, and then add comics. I'm going to do the same.
Can I just say, you know what I was just doing on my computer, Dan?
Go on.
I was watching the alternative ending where Rogue hasn't taken the cure because not only was it filmed, it is on YouTube.
Incredible. So if you type in Iceman, X-Men, and then comics or comic, and have a glance down the images that crop up of Iceman.
Oh, cool. That looks wicked.
What's he doing in a lot of them? Not all, but a lot of them.
Well, he's like spraying ice out, and he's fully frozen. He's
But
an ice man.
But is he travelling by any particular method? You notice in these?
Yeah, he sort of looks like the Silver Surfer. He's like created ice and surfing along on it.
Yeah, Iceman sliding along a big sort of track made of ice is one of the most iconic things that character does. It's like Spider-Man swinging through the cities, right? Bobby, in his non-fully iced form, doesn't necessarily need to do that. But if you're going to go to the trouble of making him fucking actually like Iceman, that's like putting Spider-Man in the suit and then not showing him swinging through the New York skyline. Don't do it if you're not doing it properly. Okay. What are you doing? Like, what are you actually doing? Abysmal. And the fight itself is just, like I said, the worst thing, one of the worst things in the movie. Dreadful. Just beams at each other until someone does it harder. I hate it so much.
It's such a shame, because if you think about it, maybe with the... No, I'm not... I don't think it is an exception. Because, look, Wolverine's past gets dropped in this movie. Magneto and Charles being friends but on differing views isn't really an arc, doesn't really, function as an arc. Jean and Wolverine isn't particularly clunky. Rogue and Wolverine not given much time in the later two movies. If you think about it, in a traditional arc sense, Pyro and Iceman's relationship is probably the biggest. It's the one that actually is a thread through every movie, given a relative amount of screen time every movie. And it's such a shame that the conclusion to that, the thing that actually two movies have been building for, isn't executed well.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yep. 100% agreed. It's like they were like, we know we need to put it in, but it felt begrudging. That's what it is. It's in the movie, but it feels like they begrudged doing it. That's my interpretation of it. Let's quickly head back to something we touched on but never really got into more detail of. I mean, I don't know if there is anything more to say about it, but the tone of this movie is wrong as well the entire time. Like not only is all the story points and all the character stuff mushed together in a bad way that doesn't work, and nothing is satisfying about any of this movie. And they've got 1,000 characters, and then only 6 of them line up to fight at the end. Like Angel never suits up. Rogue never suits up. Cyclops is dead. Jean's defected. Like there's no Nightcrawler nowhere to be seen. So in the end, after all of that, we get a lineup of like 5 or 6 of the X-Men to save the day. But like even forgetting all of that, which just like makes no sense at all. The tone, it's too light and jokey, right? Like it's wrong. It doesn't. It's like a proto Marvel movie before anyone knew how to do it right.
Yeah, and it's so strange to me because this movie is so old. But I was watching, and for me, it was most noticeable because I didn't necessarily know it was a Danger Room training scenario. I for all I knew, this film is traded as quite like an apocalyptic film. For all I knew, we were seeing a flash forward in that first scene. So the tone of that and the tone of the jokes in that just really threw me off guard for the entire film. That's where I really noticed it. That not too distant Danger Room scene.
Yeah, and I think the thing with that is like it does carry on, but like. It is most noticeable there because it's so jarring if you're going from X2 into X3. So that first scene is where you really notice it. And then you just sort of like, you adjust your expectations a bit and you go, okay, I guess this movie's got a different approach. You sort of like, you're not stopping to notice it every time it does it because it does it for the entire, 90-minute runtime, which by the way, mercifully short. I will give it that. The final act is mercifully short, which is we could not say for X2. But yeah, it's just like I don't understand what the thinking was there. It's too much banter during action sequences is always like a questionable thing. There's ways to bake it in where it feels natural, and like, but if it's happening during an actual life or death punch out, I mean, look, the Marvel movies do throw jokes in, but it's usually in scenes where the stakes aren't quite as high. So, for example, I'll just pluck Civil War out of the ether to make this point with. But you can probably do this with most Marvel movies. Jokes are happening when the heroes are clashing because none of them really want to kill each other. They're both on different sides, and there's kind of it's not a life or death fight. There's important stuff on the line in this fight, but no one is outright trying to actually full on kill the other. They're hoping to capture, subdue, right? Jokes all over the place in that sequence, right? The end of that very movie, big fight scene, Cap and Iron Man. No jokes happening there, right? The movie knows when to treat the fight sequences seriously and when to do the jokes. And I don't mind there being jokes in the Danger Room sequence. They're in the Danger Room. They're not really in trouble. Now, it's a bit weird if you're watching the movie and you don't yet know they're in the Danger Room because they're also pulling that trick of you think it's real and then they, Danger Room powers down and we reveal it's a training exercise. So it's a little bit off because you don't know it's not real in the moment if you're watching this fresh. Which is how we have to review these movies, is under the expectation most people aren't going to watch them multiple times like we do because we're sad. So there's already that part of it doesn't work. But you could excuse the Danger Room stuff in hindsight because you go, oh, they were joking because it wasn't serious. But at the end of the movie, when lives are on the line and there's a big army of generic leather-clad mutants, which, by the way, don't care for that. Just generic mutants. Just Magneto's got an army. What do? I don't know. They throw spikes at each other, I guess. Okay, sure. It's 8 different mutants that have spike powers in this movie. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The leather-clad generic mutants fighting the X-Men should be serious. There's a lot on the line. And yet they're still making little bantery jokes. Stop it, movie. Stop it.
You know what? Speaking of the ending, you know what is a real sign that this movie is cluttered as fuck and there's too much going on?
Go on.
We've not even mentioned the kid. We're 45 minutes in. We've not even mentioned the kid that takes away mutant powers that they've been fucking draining power from and using to create the cure.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really know how that works, but it doesn't seem good, does it?
No, and it's not really. What even happens to that kid at the end? Where's that kid by the end of the movie? So much. It's just oh, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, I don't know, man. So let's talk about that plot line. So another thing that sort of starts mildly promising but then doesn't go anywhere like most of the things in this movie. I really like Angel in this movie, and his dad is obviously the guy making the cure, and it's a result of him. So the way that, for those who don't remember, Angel, there's this really powerful scene early in the movie where, as a kid, Angel was clipping his own wings, which is this really great little bit of body horror. It's really gory and quite dark, and it feels in tone with the previous movies actually, because the last 2 movies are pretty dark as it goes. I don't just mean visually dark; I mean dark in tone. And the Angel clipping the wings scene when he was a youngster at the beginning of the movie, it feels in line with that to me, and it's one of the better scenes in this movie. Because again, it's very evocative. It's a really hard to look at visual, and it's very powerful. And then the dad sees him, and he's
it's very gory.
And it makes you think you understand the villain's motives here. The guy that's trying to do the cure, well, he saw his son trying to cure himself, essentially. You know what I mean? From his perspective, these people don't want to be that way. They want to be able to go back to being normal. They don't want to be different. That's his logic, and it's wrong. Obviously, he's making assumptions about a whole huge swath of people based on his own child. One individual. But you sort of get it, right? And I think that's a really good starting point for the mutant cure storyline. I'm on board with that. I like that. And I don't even mind the idea of giving the mutant cure a sort of face. They've developed it because they've reverse engineered the power of a child who can drain you of your powers. And the great thing about X-Men is the comics have been going so long that you can just pluck a character out of the air that really does do that from the annals of the comics. So there is a character called Leech whose power is to disable your power when you are close to him. That perfect, I guess. It fits because, again, you need a character to do something specific in an X-Men movie. Just check the X-Men wiki, I guess. You'll find one because if it can be thought of, it's been thought of. but like they don't do anything with it. It's like this really creepy like kid that's in like a lab, and he's in like a if memory serves from 18 days ago, sorry, but if my memory serves, he spends most of the movie in like a hospital dressing gown type thing, like you know, he's constantly in surgery. Like he lives in a perpetual state of surgery. They never go into the details of how it works. We don't know if he's suffering or if he's just, you know, being treated right. It seems in the brief interactions we have that he's not being completely mistreated. But that doesn't feel in line with the X-Men movies either. So you never really know in the end if they're saving him from a real torturous fate, or if it's just like, oh, every so often they have to do an injection. Or draw a little bit of blood.
But also, doesn't the movie... This might be me misremembering. But doesn't the movie... I get the impression the cure is still available. It's just more down to the mutant's choice at the end of the movie. So, if the cure's still available, are they still, you know, taking the stuff from the kid? Or?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, look, my expectation was that once the kid is gone, they can't make any more, but they've still got the stock they made. But it's also look, it's hard to put together for a few reasons. One, it's very confusing anyway, because there's one scene where they're testing it for the first time on Angel. Angel escapes, and then literally 30 seconds later in screen time, like 2 scenes later or something, it's like it's barely any. They have it in a gun ready to shoot at Mystique. So it's gone from not being tested yet to being in gun form very quickly. So the movie doesn't really know what it's doing with that anyway, if I'm being honest. So there's 2 interpretations you can gather. Is the kid stops being there, so they've only got a stockpile, and when that's gone, it's gone. Or now they've reverse engineered it from the kid, they can continue to reproduce it. But if it's that answer, that begs the question, why was the kid still there at all? If you've now got it to reproduce without the child, why were you still keeping this child in a hospital gown in a weird little closed ward on Alcatraz? It just raises so many questions, Chris. It doesn't make sense, like much of this movie. And then the cure itself isn't really done anything with. Like, I know we kind of harped on this, but like, is it because for different storylines? But this is another storyline that's like, that's an interesting idea. Do we do anything with it? Not really. No. It doesn't really go anywhere. It's just an excuse for everyone to fight at the end.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's not. And I think, you know, the reality is, and I expect this has been said before, but either picking we've got a mutant cure movie or picking a Dark Phoenix movie would have made sense. And I think if you want to at least pretend it's a last hurrah, you do the mutant cure movie. If you want to, continue it on, you do the Dark Phoenix movie. You know, or maybe you do mutant cure, and the tease at the end is the Dark Phoenix. And you know, the notion that, oh shit, things seem settled. We've kind of come to our conclusions here, but this threat's rising. You don't do this.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think, like, also just like there's too many characters. Like, pick some characters and stick with them. No one gets enough screen time in this movie. No individual gets enough screen time. All of the character arcs are these weird truncated messes. The Wolverine's and Storm's little arc, where in the training room sequence, like, you know, he's like, wait, let me see if I can find it. I wrote it down somewhere. Wait, let me. It's so fucking bad. Right, okay. Logan. Yes, okay, so Storm says they should be working as a team, and Logan's like, the best defense is a good offense, right, in the opening scene. And then later in the movie, right, I hope you're all listening, because this is real big, this is like real big brain stuff here. This is 3D chess. At the end of the movie, they said the other thing to each other because they've learned something. Character arcs, yay! Storm is the one who's like, yeah, best defense is good offense, and Logan's all like, we should work as a team. Oh, they've learned, Chris. Congratulations. It's the laziest, most thin, like, quote unquote, arc in the movie, which, by the way, you could go, well, Storm's arc is about becoming the leader of the X-Men. Is it? Because who does the rousing speech and says, we're X-Men, right before they go to the final battle? Because it ain't fucking Storm. It should be. Storm's the one whose quote-unquote arc is being burdened with the leadership of the X-Men in the wake of everyone above her just dying under mysterious circumstances. Psst, Storm did it. No, she was just bumping off people so she could inherit the X-Men. No, I'm kidding. But like, you know, if the premise of the movie is that she's inheriting that power, why isn't it Storm that makes the rousing speech about being an X-Man and being a team and standing, you know, making a stand? Why is that Logan? Someone could argue, oh, that's Logan's arc across the three movies coming to an end, not his arc in this movie, because, you know, the first movie is like, what do you want me to do? Put on a suit, be an X-Man? Blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to do that because I'm Wolverine. Brr, snickety-snick, you know, whatever, bub, you know, all that stuff. But, like, this movie has a plot about Storm becoming the leader, but then concludes with Wolverine's arc about becoming a leader. And fucking hell, I just... Pick a lane movie. Make it make sense. This is such a mess.
That's the sort of headline for the entire movie. Pick a lane movie. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a big piece we've not talked about is Charles's death. For me, the things I thought about Charles's death were I wanted more Magneto Charles stuff within it, and it's like they chose to like the choice for his last look to be a Wolverine, right? Mm-hmm. If you had just watched this movie and you hadn't seen the other two X-Men, if you just watched this movie, you are fucking confused as to why Wolverine's so upset, and you are confused as to why Charles looks at him at the end.
Yeah, because all you've seen is them bicker like children.
They ain't friends in the rest of this movie.
Yeah. It's like these two guys that hate each other, they're on his deathbed, all they wanted to be is together.
Yeah. Like,
as they look at each other, it's like, and I will always love. Yeah, you're right. It's so wrong.
Weird. It just doesn't make sense for what this movie's doing, because the movie doesn't want to pick a lane. It wants them bickering, but also it wants this raw pain and all of this sort of stuff. I know he was the leader. I know he was the leader of the school. I don't think it's fair that his tomb gets a picture and no one else's does. But anyway,
wait, I missed that. Sorry.
His tombstone has like this big bust of his head, or this picture of his head. Like,
outrageous.
Just Cyclops. Cyclops is just like Cyclops. Yeah.
Cyclops. I guess he was a student here once or something. I don't know.
Yeah. As we've said about other set pieces, though, I don't think the visuals are bad. I don't think the visuals of that scene is actually quite like tense, and it is quite effective, I thought.
Yeah.
And you know, the explosion is quite brutal and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's funny. I think it's funny that I don't know if you noticed this. He's like, Magneto goes in the house, and I think it's to Juggernaut or one of his nameless fucking lackeys. I think it's Juggernaut. And he goes into the house and he goes, no one gets inside. And like the first thing Juggernaut does is throw Wolverine inside.
Yeah. Which, you know what, I couldn't decide if that was just bad writing or like an intentional joke, because the movie, as I said, you know, it has got a lot of jokes in it. Yeah, I mean, look, like the evidence would imply bad writing, because, you know, evidence would imply, but like. The movie's full of little quips like that, like my last cigar thing when he loses his cigar in the danger room, you know, full of stuff like that. So it doesn't, it's not completely out of the realms of possibility that was the joke. Juggernaut's an idiot. Magneto said no one goes inside. He immediately throws Wolverine into the place. 100% possible. You're right, though, it's probably not. One of the things I do like about that scene is Wolverine's attempt to save Charles. As Jean's power is rising and the house is crumbling, and Wolverine's using his claws to stabilize himself, to drag himself in. It's the closest thing, one of the closest things the screenplay gets to writing an interesting set piece, to be honest. I don't mind that at all. But go on.
Like we've talked about earlier, I don't mind Mystique's rescue either, especially the way Magneto just like disposes of the cars around it and all of that sort of stuff.
Flipping a truck two whole years before the Joker did it. Just saying. Just saying.
Exactly, man. Exactly.
But like, do you not think though, like as well though, like in terms of like, yeah, okay, so Professor X's death, right, is dramatically shot and an effective visual, just the same way Angel clipping his wings is effective visually, right? But it's like it's that same problem of it's shocking for the wrong reasons because it's not really. So the reason you're surprised when Professor X gets Professor X in this movie is because you're like, well, he's part of the story. Kind of, you must have something real good planned if you've just taken out a key component of this story 45 minutes in, right? It's shocking because you're like, well, now what? Like the same with Cyclops' death. Shocking, yes, because I'm pretty sure you need him to do the Phoenix story correctly. And again, there are probably ways to have made both of those things work. Like I said, I really think they should have lent into one of the things that sends Jean over the edge, and they really lean into it, is that she realizes she killed Cyclops, and it is kind of what the movie does, but in one brief scene, and it's never really mentioned again. But like, because then she's just Phoenix, I guess. But also just like Phoenix just like hanging out with Magneto. Why? Why is that a team up? Why does she agree to that? She's a cosmic being of immense and unfathomable power. She's just chilling with Magneto. All right. Why? Make any of this make sense. You know what it's like the scenes were all stapled together individually instead of as one whole script, and there were 4 or 5 drafts and all the scenes got muddled, because sometimes it just feels like this scene belongs in a different draft of this movie. Like when things were different.
Yeah.
Every scene is beholden to just itself. I will say,
yeah.
We shit on it a lot, Chris. The characters don't work, the story doesn't work, but you know what? I've got to give the movie credit. The dialogue doesn't work either.
Yeah, it's one of the most offensive things.
The dialogue is significantly worse immediately. There's so much drivel in the opening scene. So, by the way, I should clarify actually a little compliment: the de-aging at the beginning of the movie, because there's a scene that shows young Magneto and Professor X going to pick up young Jean, right? And I really like the de-aging. I think, considering the year it was brought out, it's incredible.
Yes, it is very, very good. I was also very impressed with that. It's definitely better on Patrick Stewart, a man who tends not to age anyway.
Yeah, that's fair. They've smoothed him out a bit. Yeah. No, I think it looks pretty good on both. I do agree. Patrick Stewart's is more impressive and works better than McKellen's. But on the whole, considering the year this movie was made, like, was it 2006?
Yes,
this comes
I agree.
Out? Incredible. Like, chef's kiss, beautiful,
and better than a lot of de-aging in movies 20 years later.
Yeah, right. When they're not given more than 5 minutes to make it. Right, make Robert Downey Jr. younger. Why? Doesn't matter. Do it in 5 seconds. Okay, but the dialogue is so much worse in this movie. In that scene, I knew we were in trouble, and that scene is like the second scene of the movie. Maybe even the first. Might be the first scene of the movie.
This is the first scene. I think it goes that flashback, and then Angel, because obviously technically that's a flashback. Yep. And then the danger not room. Too distant future.
Yeah, the danger room. Yeah, cool. Okay. Well, that scene immediately, they are talking, right? So much sort of generic drivel that sort of sounds meaningful when a Patrick Stewart or an Ian McKellen says it. But if you actually write the words down, and I did this with one of the sentences, if you actually write the words down and a Dan Doolan says it, you'll realise it's meaningless, right? I'm going to read it to you. Will you control that power, or will it control you?
Ooh.
Doesn't it? Like, again, if you give Sir Patrick Stewart that dialogue, you go, whoa, that's something clever, I think.
That vaguely means something. Cool.
It's incredible. I genuinely, there was one line of dialogue in the whole movie I liked, Chris. Would you like me to say it?
Yeah, I'd love it. Yeah,
it's Cyclops to Wolverine. Not everyone heals as fast as you, Logan.
Yeah, you know what? You know what I really liked as well
Beautiful.
about that particular piece of dialogue.
Yes.
I thought James Marsden's acting for it
So good.
was fucking brilliant
Yeah.
because he doesn't say it right away, and that's correct. The Cyclops character wouldn't think of it right away. It's like he almost. It's like he gives the character a beat to think of it and then say it.
Yeah,
it's
to the
brilliant.
point where you could
Like-
imagine a version of it where he doesn't think of it until he's walked away, and he goes, "Damn it, that's what I should have said."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
it's great.
It's really completely sincere here. Like
No, I agree.
Marston's acting is phenomenal in that moment.
When
and
is
it's
it
phenomenal
not?
in general? But
When is it like that's the thing? Is like he is so good. He is the absolute MVP of these movies. Like let me rephrase that. He is the unappreciated MVP of these movies. Obviously, these are some of the best. As we've already said, these are the best cast movies. Full stop. Maybe from this era. Like it's just incredible. This cast. But just quietly under the surface, Marsden just absolutely being a fucking linchpin of acting, like under all of that, the whole time, and just really understanding his character properly, like, yeah, I mean, and even in this movie where he's literally nothing to work with, he still does a great performance. It's just incredible.
who is the MVP? Oh, it's got to be Hugh Jackman, isn't it? Because it can't be Patrick Stewart because he gets fucking Professor X every movie.
Yeah, he does. It's between 40 minutes and an hour and 15 minutes into every movie, they write him out of the movie. It's incredible. It's consistent. I'll give them that.
Obviously, Ian McKellen's a contender, and I have to say, in terms of like small moments of acting, and I really wish they'd cut back to his face because I would have loved to have seen what Ian McKellen would have done with that moment. But him sat on that bench, even though he's the villain and a prick, him sat on the bench at the end, you feel for him. Like it's jarring, it's upsetting, and it's such a small moment. But Ian McKellen's performance in that moment is kind of haunting. It's much better than because the dialogue is just so bad. It's much better than the "what have I done?" No, that doesn't fit Magneto. Like, it doesn't matter. Even if you've just taken away the powers, even if he can see the destruction, Magneto would not then doubt his motives and his actions. Like, that's just out of character bullshit. So I didn't really like that moment, but I don't blame Ian McKellen for that. I blame the script. But him sat on the bench, like, drained of his power, looking at the chess set, just willing the pieces to move, like, that was great. That was a brilliant performance.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. 100% agree. And I think everyone... Here's the thing, is like, because it's such a good cast, it's like everyone is capable of doing good stuff, but half this cast are absolutely, handicapped by the script. Like, can we not... Let's not pretend Halle Berry isn't an Oscar-winning actress, right? And yet... Nothing. They give her nothing in this movie. Like, she has some of the most generic, boring, flat dialogue you could possibly give a human being. And God bless her, is she trying to make it not that? And I don't mean to sound patronizing there. I really don't, because she's so capable, and I know that. But fuck me. It's like... The character is so flatly written. I don't think anyone would have been capable of making that character better than she did here. I don't think anyone would have been. But fucking hell, it's bad, isn't it? It's
really bad.
It's because she's written so flatly. And like, Christ, when you think about the potential for some of the cool stuff you could do, both from a writing and acting perspective, with a character like Phoenix, that split personality thing, nothing. I cannot tell you how sad I am for Famke Janssen, who plays Jean Grey, because the prospect of this as an actor must have been the most exciting idea, right? You get this role, you look it up, you start reading the comics. I'm going to assume she wasn't a fan already. She might have been, but I'm just going to work under that assumption. She reads the comics. Jean has this incredible arc that she's the center of. Obviously, we're not doing that in the first movie. It's a big thing, but that's okay. Second movie, we're setting it up. Oh my God, I'm going to get to do the cool thing. And then to get this script, I don't know why she didn't just walk the fuck out, truthfully. Maybe she'd already signed on because she knew it was going to be a Phoenix script. But like, Jesus Christ, like, are you kidding me? Well, she does nothing. She just stands stoically all movie. She just, and then there's a bit in the middle where she's like half asleep and mumbling. Like it's nothing. From an acting perspective, this is like this must have been a disaster to get this script. I can't imagine. I felt for again, as always, I feel for the women of these movies more than the men, because the men often get good stuff to work with. The women, not so much. Same with Rogue. She gets to stand around stoically a lot. Storm gets to deliver some really generic boss dialogue. As we've already talked about, Jean Grey, nothing. I mean, the closest to like, what's a good role for a woman in this movie? Like, are we really gonna just say that one Mystique sequence? It's not great.
Yeah, yeah. I think we are. Like, yeah, there's not any other, like you say, it's difficult because they're all brilliant. You know, Halle Berry's doing a lot with a little.
Yeah. These are all very capable actresses, all of them. No. Yeah.
In terms of like their scenes they've been given to do that are particularly powerful, exciting, whatever. No, there's not really any.
They even like go to the trouble just to give us an extra fuck you to the trouble to just women in general. They give Magneto a female sort of like leader of that sort of gang of mutants he acquires, and they pull in the character Callisto from the comics. Now, it doesn't really matter. She's Callisto in name only, really, you know. But like, fine. And one of my favorite scenes in the movie, or funny dialogue exchanges in the movie, actually, is I think she asks Magneto, if you're so proud of being a mutant, where are your tattoos? And he's like, I've been there, done that. You know, he doesn't say that. He says like, I've been tattooed before. A needle will never touch this skin again. You know, I thought that's one of the closest things this movie gets to a good exchange. But again, she's written super flatly. She's just generic thuggy mutant lady. Like, she's, again, nothing. It's, I don't know, are the writers misogynists, or do they just not know how to write women? I can't figure it out.
I don't think I think you're being too cut. The writers don't know how to write, Dan. It seems, I'm not necessarily saying, it could be studio, it could be all sorts.
We'll talk a bit about that. The studio do bear the brunt of this for me, but we'll come back to why that is shortly.
Yeah. I just think they haven't. The scenes aren't there for them, and it's a real massive shame.
Yeah, let's talk briefly then about Iceman and good old Bobby Drake and Kitty Pryde, Shadowcat herself. I actually think this is one of the more functional elements of this script because it's consistent scene to scene. Like, it never feels like a scene from a different draft of this story falls into this movie like it does with some of the others. I like that love triangle. I think it works reasonably well. It makes sense that, a teenage boy would struggle with having a girlfriend he couldn't touch. And I feel like he does seem to have the movie sells me on a genuine connection with Kitty. That scene where they go sort of ice skating is quite sweet and well done. Predictable ending of Rogue looking out the window and watching it like in a soap opera, but fine. That's it is what it is. I think it works pretty well, and I think both actors are doing quite good. That's good English. That is, Chris. They're doing quite well with what they have.
I think as well. I don't get me wrong. I think they well, clearly if there was a kiss, they filmed some shit that contradicted this. But I thought actually, of all the editing decisions they made, that storyline was edited very well because you understand, at least my interpretation of it, you understand why Rogue thinks there's a problem and is getting annoyed and is getting jealous, yes. Especially like the, insanely romantic ice skating and all that sort of shit. Mm-hmm. But you never get the vibe from Bobby, particularly, apart from maybe the look in the danger room. But you never but even then he's just like, thanks, Kitty. Like, you never get the vibe from Bobby that he is interested. Like, you understand from Rogue's point of view why it seems romantic, but from either Kitty or Bobby, you never get an overwhelming sense of they might have an affair. And I don't think that's in the writing or the filming, especially if they filmed a kiss scene. But the editing does that quite well, I think.
Yeah, I would actually, because I would agree that like taking the kiss out is the smartest choice, because it absolutely could be read as they've got a connection, they're close, but it's not necessarily romantic, and Rogue is jumping to conclusions a bit, which kind of is like an understandable teenage panic, right? And it doesn't cast Bobby in a bad light where he's like got a girlfriend, but coming on to someone else. And it's a bit, and that version of it is a bit more respectful to Kitty as a character as well, because Kitty Pryde is a lot of people's favorite X-Man, so to speak. And I think I think that would have done her dirty a bit as well, to be honest. So yeah, I think they made a lot of smart choices with that storyline, and it mostly functions. So can't really criticize that one.
Yeah, for sure. What other notes have you got before we triv?
I've only got a couple because we've covered most of them. It looks like I've been sort of keeping my eye on it as we've gone and made sure I've mentioned as much as I can. There's a little Stan Lee cameo. So of the 3 X-Men movies, he has cameos in the first one and in this one. In this one he's like a a bewildered neighbor as the water coming out of his hose starts floating up because Jean sort of switches on her powers in the opening sequence. Delightful. In the first movie, he was like a bystander when that senator went back on the beach as a jelly man, and Stan Lee's all like, "Whoa, that guy's a jelly man." But he wasn't in the second one for some reason. Always thought that was strange. No Stan Lee cameo in 2 for some reason.
Yeah, did they? Well, I suppose you'd have mentioned last week if there was triv about it. I don't know if they filmed one and didn't, whatever.
Yeah, or just didn't find the time. I guess at the time it wasn't like a firm rule that Stan Lee cameos in your Marvel movie. But there you go. Oh yeah, I wrote here about Magneto appealing to disenfranchised mutants is another good idea. I like that as an idea. I don't think the execution is particularly great, with the exception of that one dialogue exchange we talked about. But yeah, there you go. I love that we finally got Angel, and the visuals for Angel are good when his wings burst out. Like, yes.
Oh, brilliant. Great visual. Just fantastic visual.
And him, soaring away. Just beautiful. But the other, to be fair, the other side of that coin, though, is when one of the cheesiest, schmaltziest, shittiest scenes in the whole movie then follows it, where he shows up at the school, and he's like, "Is this a safe place for mutants?" While they're all, trying to decide if they need to close the school, and Storm sort of stands up and is like, "It was, and it still is." Oh, fuck off. Just fuck right off.
Yeah, but Dan, that's the conclusion to her story arc. They don't give her the big speech later.
Yeah, you're right. It's the best thing she gets, isn't it? The fight scene outside the house that we talked about earlier is probably one of the better fight scenes in the movie. I noted that down at the time as I was watching it. It's when Storm does her spinny thing. She spins and leaps over everyone with lightning shooting out and stuff. That's pretty cool. It's interesting, I guess. The bridge is a cool visual and all, but couldn't Magneto have just shaped any amount of metal into a big disc that they could have all stood on and then floated over the water to the island?
Yes, yeah, especially as that's what he did in the second one to escape and stuff. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, not just me then. Cool. While I do hate them forcing the cure on Magneto, one thing I do like in the final act that I wrote notes about was Wolverine's distraction, because Wolverine attempting to just go at Magneto, I was like, how fucking stupid are you? You know this won't work. I felt like, that Pete Holmes bit where he's playing Professor X firing Logan, and he's going, "Dude, you're made of metal. The thing the guy we fight the most controls." It's like, yeah, why are you on this team? So they do that, and I'm like, oh my god. I think I was probably starting to write the note. I can't believe they made Wolverine so stupid as to do the fastball special, be chucked at Magneto, the guy who was just going to hold his hand out and stop him. And then when I realized it was a plan and a deliberate foil, I almost went, "Oh, Magneto, you idiot!" And I went, "That's clever," because he thinks Logan's an idiot. He doesn't conceive of a world where Logan could have outsmarted him. So he just automatically assumes, like I did, that Logan's being an idiot and doesn't take into account the possibility that it's a trick. I think that's genuinely a brilliant bit of writing. Just hands up. Even though I don't like the choice for them to use the cure on Magneto while he's distracted with this, from a larger, the morality of this script doesn't work perspective, I do like that moment a lot.
Yeah, I think the thing about that ending is whilst the choice isn't great, and whilst the dialogue of the they swap and say the other thing is a bit cheesy, it's quite quick in terms of like it's like fight conclusion, but it does make a lot of sense. Like that ending is sensical. It does link back to the beginning of the movie. It does function better than a lot of the rest of the movie. Yeah, I would agree. I would be inclined to agree. Last thing I want to talk about that's in my notes that we haven't really covered, Wolverine's sort of shish kebabbing of Jean Grey, which I think they meant to be dramatic. But for those that remember, she's putting out Phoenix powers or whatever, and melting everyone around him. So Wolverine is the only one. Yeah, this is the take back everything I just said. This is the actual conclusion, isn't it? Oh God, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, So for those that remember, Wolverine can get close to her. His skin is like peeling. She's doing the same thing to him she did to Charles slowly. By the way, for someone all powerful, it sure does take her a long time to do this to someone. Just theoretically, comic book Phoenix would just click her fingers and your skin would rip off or whatever. But sure, we'll go on with this version. Fine, whatever. Let's. I guess it makes sense to depower her a bit so there's some tension, and she's not just able to wipe everyone off the face of the earth at the click of her fingers. So Wolverine gets closer and closer and closer because he can, and then he snicks her to the two claws, right, straight in, and that's how the story ends with Wolverine having to make the sacrifice, not of himself, but of the woman he loves. Again, the movie treats women really well. I don't know how I feel with it, because it's like he sacrifices himself to get close to Jean, potentially, because he could die doing that, and then takes her out. But in a less muddled movie, with clearer character arcs, this could have been a good conclusion, but it doesn't seem to be the conclusion to the movie we actually got. So it's like this is a leftover idea from another script, or maybe I think actually there's a chance this might be the way the original Phoenix comic ends. Maybe I'd have to double check that. Vague memories of reading it when I was 15, so you'll have to forgive me for not really remembering. But it's sort of dramatic in its own right, but it just doesn't feel like it's the end to this movie, right? Am I wrong, or do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely fair, and I don't think they've really done enough to build up I'm the only one that can stop her and all of that sort of stuff. That's not something that's embedded and wrestled with throughout the rest of the movie. It doesn't. The Dark Phoenix stuff is just handled really badly. But yeah, as a conclusion, and I don't know if that is the conclusion in the comics, if it's Wolverine that does it. But yeah, it's not good.
Yeah, but I don't think... I want to make it very clear for listeners that I'm not saying it's not good in of itself. I think it's just not good in the context of this movie because it's not set up properly. It's not earned through the character arcs. And that's, to be honest with you, that's the same for a lot of the stuff we've criticised in this. A lot of the things in this could work in isolation if we did the build-up and the setup, and if we built the foundations of the building correctly, then these things would sit quite comfortably. But we don't, ever. So it's just like this weird leaning tower of bullshit because we didn't build it right to start with. We didn't lay the correct groundwork for any of these scenes. So it's like it doesn't work in this movie, but on paper as an individual concept for a way for the movie like this to end, it's perfectly serviceable, or even could have been great. Wolverine having to give up the woman he loves to save everyone else is an interesting character point, and finding a story that takes the character from not wanting to sacrifice Jean or wanting to do anything to save Jean to having to give her up is powerful and could work. That's not what this movie does. Instead, it's just a random, sparkly, exciting quote unquote ending to the story that we've been given. And it's like, but it's not. It's just kind of like it's an ending because the script needs it to end. So yeah, look. Overall thoughts. Does the beats of several comics without attempting to comprehend or replicate what made them interesting or dramatic to start with. It's a bad movie with a really uneven script that feels like it was written in a half an hour before it was due in. Pieced together from 1,000 disconnected ideas that never come together in any sort of coherent way. With a bunch of very unfortunate choices made in regards to which characters get focus, and some of that is production-y. We'll get to that when I do trivia in a minute, but that's kind of my overall thought. It's a definite not recommend for me. I think it's a fucking dreadful movie, and I hope I never have to sit through it again. Which is
I think
strong sentiment, but it's true.
There's some set pieces I personally enjoyed, but it's got none of the characters are serviced. The movie in general is just trying to do too much, and as a result, really interesting ideas are really, really badly executed. So no, I wouldn't recommend it either.
Yeah, that actually comes back to a point I've talked about many times when we've talked about character stuff across the years, which is that for me, if you don't invest me in the characters, you can come up with the best sequences in the world. If I'm not invested in the people, I don't care what happens. My investment in those moments, as good as they can be. So even if these set pieces were the most perfect, brilliant masterpieces in the world, which they're not, but even if that was true, I still wouldn't like this movie. Because it's not supported in character, and that is the biggest. That is what it comes down to. Nothing is supported in character. Yeah.
Agreed.
All right.
Agreed.
So, not recommend. Sorry, everyone. Don't watch this one. Watch the first two and forget that this one ever happened.
And Dan wasn't particularly a fan of the second one.
Well, no, we spent a long time gushing about the first two acts of the second one. I just hated that third act. So, and it's interesting because I feel like if we'd done this for the sort of first class, let's just say trilogy, let's not include the fourth one, the attempt at Dark Phoenix. I feel like it's exactly the same. I feel like first class is basically as close to a fun, like, X-Men, like, masterpiece as I can imagine. And then you got Days of Future Past, which a lot of people love and is heralded as an absolute masterpiece, but I think it has a lot of fucking issues, and I've never loved it as much as other people have. And then the third one, which is just Apocalypse, which is just a fucking mess top to bottom. But the thing is, the only difference is, in that trilogy, Apocalypse is bad because of choices made in Days of Future Past, but anyway.
Yeah, and my memory, I haven't seen Apocalypse in a long time. I've seen it once in the cinema. My memory is that was worse than this film, but I would need to rewatch it to make a proper judgment on that.
I think I would put my money. I'm with you. I don't have any way to do a proper judgment on that. But if I was to put money on it, I would say that's probably not the case. I think it's bland and uninteresting, and it doesn't have very many interesting ideas at its core. But I think it's probably a slightly more functional movie than this in terms of just like. It's a coherence to it that this movie doesn't have, and I'll always take a coherent movie over this kind of a mess, if I'm being honest. But I think that's more of a personal preference than a hard and fast rule. It's broken in a different way. Yay, you know what I mean? All right, I prefer that movie's type of being shit to this movie's type of being shit. Doesn't really act as a compliment to either.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. That's fair.
Yeah. But that's also from memory, though. And like you, I would be interested to see if I watched them again. I'd feel that way.
Yes, I would. Yeah, I would need to rewatch them. And hey, like I've said, there is a temptation to do that. Mm-hmm. There is a temptation to now presumably go Origins, Wolverine. And then I guess it would be the Wolverine, or would it be Deadpool next? I don't know. I'd need to look, but yeah.
Yeah. So for those who aren't familiar, because we said this, Chris isn't talking about doing them as the next review on this podcast, but Chris has been looking at watching after doing these three, going through the rest of the X-Men franchise on his own time. So yeah, that's been something that's been talked about.
Oh, it looks like First Class is actually before the Wolverine. So it would be next would be Origins Wolverine, then it would be First Class, then it would be the Wolverine.
Mm-hmm. That was my memory of the timeline, but I figured you'd probably just do what you just do them as a trilogy. So you do the Logan trilogy next, then you do the First Class trilogy. Or would you just do them in release order?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, the reality is, Dan, we're probably not going to do it, but yeah, I don't know. That's up for debate how we would do it if we did.
That's fair. That is fair. Fair and reasonable.
Right, shall I do the thing?
Do the thing.
Let's triv it up.
I'm going to give you some trivia. Now, I should just outright state at the top of this, slightly different trivia this week. There's less of the... On the set, this fun thing happened, and more of just the story of the production of this movie, which I really didn't think I was going to have for this one. Because, you know, the first two famously a shit show, right? And I thought, well, this one will just be like, no one wants to talk about this movie. There won't be that much information out there. But this movie had such a fucking bizarre development process, Chris, that we're back to story time. And I am sorry, because I know we thought we were going to get a break from story time this week. But we're not. It's story time. So,
okay.
Let's do this. And I will say, just very quickly, Brett Ratner, the director of this movie, Brett the Rat Ratner, is often cited as the source of this film's lack of quality, but he was hired about 5 minutes before it was shot. So let me tell you the story of 1,000 bad decisions made by a studio. So, naturally, after the first one, Bryan Singer was on board to direct this film. He produced a partial stories treatment with the X2 writers Dan Harris and Michael Dougherty, which introduced Emma Frost, who was going to use her empath powers to manipulate a recently revived Jean Grey and bend her to Magneto's will, ultimately driving Jean mad and turning her into the Dark Phoenix. Fine. Sure. Whatever. Sigourney Weaver was in line, or is in mind at least, for Bryan Singer to play Emma Frost. It's an interesting idea. Obviously, that character did eventually show up in First Class, played by January Jones, the actress from Mad Men, and among other things. I do like January Jones. She's good. She's a good Emma Frost. The other plan was to have Gambit in that version of the movie, played by Keanu Reeves. That would have been interesting. I would have. That might be a portal gun moment. Actually, the Bryan Singer version of the third X-Men movie with Keanu Reeves as Gambit. Vaguely interesting to my brain, but anyway. That is what it is.
Yeah, I'd say so, for sure.
Yeah. But Singer left the project pretty quickly before it really got into full production, because he was offered a chance to work on an next Superman movie by Warner Brothers in 2004. Now, in 2013, he told IGN he didn't really have a fully fledged X-Men 3 in his mind, just those early rumblings and some of the ideas I just talked about. Whereas he had a really clear vision for what he thought a Superman movie could and should be. And when he left for Superman, he took the two writers from X2 with him, Harris and Dougherty, leaving the studio with basically nothing. And I mean nothing, because the cast had only signed a 2-picture deal when they signed on for the original. So the studio had to negotiate new contracts with all of the returning cast. All of them. Now, I will say, this is pure speculation. I do not know this. I wish to emphasize this. But I am absolutely certain I would put money. Let me rephrase it that. Not certain, but I would put money on the fact that if Singer had stayed on, less of the original cast would have returned.
Yeah, that all the triv from previous weeks would suggest that.
But luckily, it would have been an easier sell without Singer, especially for people like Halle Berry, who was very unhappy with him on the previous movie. The kiss my ass thing, all that stuff, which is what we talked about last week. Check out last week's episode if you don't know what I'm talking about. Now, Hugh Jackman proved here that his career is at least partially responsible, partially a factor from just having very, very good representation. Because his agents managed to negotiate a deal where he got approval of the new director worked into that contract. What the fuck? He was like, he's been famous for 10 minutes. That's a crazy thing to give Hugh Jackman. I'm not complaining, because that's good. And it also implies they weren't looking to repeat last mistakes, and that Hugh wanted to be, at least have some say in that. So, a huge number of directors nearly worked on this movie. And I'll go through this list as quickly as I possible, just in the interest of speed. Darren Aronofsky was Jackman's preferred choice and the first person they approached, because they just worked together on The Fountain, but sadly Aronofsky turned it down. Joss Whedon was offered the role of directing and working and writing this movie, but he turned it down in favor of working on the Wonder Woman film for Warner Brothers that they were developing. They wanted him to write it and direct it. Now, that film never materialized. Funnily enough, I've actually read that script, and it was quite good. But it is funny, considering that this movie ends up taking a bit of Joss's gifted comic into this story, but that didn't end up happening. I don't know who these guys are, but I took this in because it's a really funny one. Rob Bowman and Alex Proyas were considered to direct this movie, but they turned it down as a result of a feud with the then Fox president Tom Rothman that had apparently happened while they were making the movie I, Robot. I love that they had a feud with the studio head. Amazing. Zack Snyder, of all people, was approached, but he was committed to making the movie 300. Guillermo del Toro was offered this movie. Holy hell, Portal got into that reality, please. But he sadly turned it down because he was committed to doing Pan's Labyrinth. There was a gentleman called Peter Berg also turned down the role. Basically, it sounds like they went to half of Hollywood, again, to get a director for this one and could not find someone. And I'm pretty sure that happened for the first movie too. So in February 2005, and I want to put emphasis on this, in February 2005, there was no director attached. So Fox did the obvious smart thing and announced a May 5th, 2006 release date. Brilliant. Just great. No director, let's announce a release date. A month later, in March, the studio finally got their shit together and signed on Matthew Vaughn to direct. Now, for those of you going, wait a minute, that name sounds familiar. Yeah, director of First Class, Matthew Vaughn. So he basically cast Kelsey Grammer, Diana Ramirez, who played Callisto, and Vinnie Jones as Juggernaut. That was one of the few contributions he made before not finishing this movie, and we'll get to that in a second. Because let me tell you, Chris, we've had some stories of why people didn't direct movies in the past. Wait till you hear this one, but very quickly first. Kelsey Grammer was so keen to play Beast that he agreed to actually do an audition for the studio. And it was the first time he'd auditioned in over 20 years, but he just desperately wanted to play Beast. He thought he was perfect for Beast, and he was right. On June 1st...
Absolutely.
Yeah. On June 1st, just 2.5 months after being announced, the studio announced Vaughn had now left the project. So 2.5 months later, Vaughn was off. Now, I found an article from the time by the BBC. The studio had told them he left the production to spend more time with his family. So this is the quote. A 20th Century Fox spokesman put out a statement that as the shooting evolved, he realised he would have to move to Los Angeles and Vancouver for at least a year. Not wishing to uproot his family, Vaughn opted to depart the production. So that all sounds kind of sensible, right? Yeah. Let's hear Vaughn's side of that. So years later, we get two different explanations as to why Vaughn left this project. Both from Vaughn, both conceivable as reasons that built into this choice. So, number one, and you won't be surprised to discover this is different, but Vaughn told The Telegraph in 2021, so this has all come out recently, that he simply didn't have the time to make the movie he wanted to make. Yeah, I'm not surprised. They were releasing it like 12 months later. I had a vision for how it should be, and I wanted to make sure I was making a movie as good as X-Men 2, and I knew there was no way this could be it, based on the time he had. Now, that does track, because he did ask for Fox to give him more time, and they did. They obliged by moving it 3 weeks to the 26th of May the next year. Brilliant. Good work, Fox. So that's the initial reason we got in 2021 from Vaughn. But people kept prodding, and in an amazing interview, just an astounding interview with The Hollywood Reporter in 2023, he told the story of going in to a meeting with some Fox... In fact, I'm just going to read his quote. I went into a meeting with one of the executives, and I saw an X-Men 3 script, and I immediately knew it was a lot fatter. I was like, what the hell is this draft? The producer said, don't worry about it. And I'm like, no, I'm the director. I am worrying about this draft. He wouldn't tell me, so I grabbed it. Literally. It was a crazy moment. Opened the first page and it said, Africa, storm, kids dying of no water. She creates a thunderstorm and saves the children. I said, what is this? And they said, oh, it's Halle Berry's script. To which he replied, okay, because she hasn't signed up yet. And they replied, but this is what she wants it to be. And once once she signs up, we will throw it in the bin. Matthew Vaughn said, mad. I was like, wow, you're going to do that to an Oscar-winning actress? I'm out of here. So I quit at that point. Now, just want to recap what we've learned there. Matthew Vaughn left the project after a Fox executive tried to trick Halle Berry into signing on to this movie with a fake script, which had a larger role for Storm, where she heads to Africa and rescues children.
But, like, presumably someone got paid to write that as well.
Yeah. I don't understand. Mad. Hollywood's insane. I mean, so I understand their eagerness to convince her to come back. Obviously, she initially decided not to come back for this film and had said that, she didn't like the lack of character development in the previous two installments. So because some people have taken this to mean, what I think is even more damning about this is how they chose to try and entice Halle Berry. Because what's interesting, so a lot of people have gone like, wait, does that imply Halle Berry wanted Storm to go to Africa and save children? Like, that's a strange thing she wanted. But from what I've gathered, she just wanted more of a role, more character development. And how that was interpreted...
Yeah, which isn't unreasonable.
No, not unreasonable at all, considering the previous two movies. But the choice they made to try and entice her was to do a fucking weird, race-based caricature-y, she goes to Africa and saves children of drought. They thought that would win because Halle Berry's skin color.
I'd really love to read the rest of that script, because do they try and link that scene into anything else that happens, do they not?
Yeah, I mean, it was a dummy script, so I don't think it was ever probably shown to anyone but Berry's people. But fuck me. So she didn't want to reprise her role as Storm because of the lack of character development and a tense relationship with Bryan Singer. But after his departure, she did then suffer a bit of a box office bomb with Catwoman. So that is one of the reasons she eventually did agree to come back with her role expanded. Now, what they settled on was obviously this plot line where she replaces Cyclops and Professor X as the team leader. But I don't want to besmirch Halle Berry or her people here, but they should have seen through this script immediately and how shallow that ended up being, if I'm being honest. Because, on paper, she gets to become leader of the X-Men, but they should have really paid some attention because doesn't amount to anything.
She doesn't even get, a moment. In X2, she obviously had the moment in the fake, whatever it's called, room, superhero room. She doesn't have. I can't think of a Storm moment in this movie.
No,
I can barely think of her using her powers.
Yeah, all I got is the visual of her spinning as she hits the house from the scene when Jean is Professor X being Professor X. Yeah,
but that's it. Yeah, mad.
So just 4 days after announcing Vaughn had left, Fox confirmed Brett Ratner was confirmed to replace him. Now, I want to note something here. So Vaughn leaves the project sometime in May. They announced that he left on June 1st. Ratner is confirmed early June. The movie shoots in August. Jeez. Keep that. So they've hired Ratner in June. The movie is shooting in August to try and hit this, May release date for the next year, for 2006. So during all this sort of, actually, let me just very clearly say, with that in mind, are we all starting to understand why this movie is a weird, soulless, hollow shell of a film?
Yeah, of course.
Because,
mad.
Brett Ratner, who I don't care for as a director, don't get me wrong, but at least, give him some time to work on the script, make it his own. I mean, he was a proper gun for hire in this. They brought him in just to shoot the thing. Just get it filmed, whatever. The biggest mistake this studio made was sticking to that release date and never budging. When they brought on a new director like Vaughn, they should have given him more time to do it properly. When you hire someone talented like Vaughn, you want to make a good movie, Vaughn's not going to come in and just shoot the shitty script you've got floating around. Is he? He's going to want to make a good script and a good movie. And, you know, poor Brett Ratner, obviously he chose to do this, but, like, you know, he gets all of the blame for this movie. He worked on it for 5 minutes, like, in the grand scheme of things. Most of this movie's problems are not his, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So during all this director musical chairs, the studio were obviously developing a script, because there's no way they started from scratch once Brett Ratner came on, right? So it's worth going backwards a little bit here to August of the previous year. Because August of the previous year is when they hired Simon Kinberg, who had written the Fantastic Four movie, but also the Elektra movie. He was hired back in 2004 to write a script. But they did the insane thing they did on X2 again, Chris. They hired Zach Penn to develop a different draft, and then the two were brought together in early 2005 to combine their screenplays. Why are we doing this again? Well, I guess with X2 they feel like it worked. I guess. Because X2 turned out all right. Like, and it made a lot of money and it was critically praised.
Well, yeah, that's true. I forgot. I forgot about Kinberg and the fact that this film was so heavily criticised, and then everyone just went, all right, when he came back to try and attempt the Dark Phoenix story again.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
Which, if memory serves, he'd never directed before at that point. Like, yeah. So he was just not only writing it again, but he was given the hands to direct it.
Yeah, still couldn't get it right. Incredible. Yeah, Simon Kinberg has a lot to answer for. That Elektra movie as well. Yikes. But anyway, they did that insane thing again where they got two different writers to write drafts and bring them together. But as if that wasn't a bad enough idea, here are some other ways in which the studio fucked this script. Right. Firstly, for those unaware, obviously, the two big influences on this script from the comics are the Dark Phoenix saga arc from the Uncanny X-Men, written by Chris Claremont and John Byrne, and Gifted, which is by Joss Whedon and artist John Cassidy. I recently reread Gifted. It's an excellent comic. If people can dig that out, you can get it in trade paperback form. It's very good. It isn't the full story. That story continues into the next arc, which I haven't read yet, but I probably will because I was enjoying reading it. So I'm probably gonna push through, because I think Joss in total produced like 24 issues for that run, and they're released in like 6-issue batches as trade paperbacks. So if anyone's interested, it's really good. So the studio were the studio, it turns out, were hesitant to tackle the Phoenix plot, even though that was one of the two comics chosen to be adapted. They thought the Cure plot would be a better fit with the tone of the previous two movies, which is right, but Kinberg felt that the Dark Phoenix saga could serve as the emotional side of the film, while the Gifted side of the story could cover the political and plot elements. Now, I sort of admire his ambition, but that is incorrect. Balancing those two stories, it turns out, was more than he could handle. But the studio's resistance to fully committing to the Dark Phoenix plot did sort of hamper his attempts to do it, because this is cited as the reason Jean Grey doesn't end up with much to do in the end, basically, because they felt the tone of the Dark Phoenix story was too dark for a summer blockbuster. So they kept pushing to reduce the story. So Kinberg, to his credit, never really got the chance on this occasion to do it properly, because the studio was so reluctant. And they never quite had the balls to just tell him, no, take it out altogether. So instead, you end up with this movie where it's kind of there, but the studio wouldn't let him do it properly. So there's another way the studio fucked the script. The other one is that when they requested that they kill off Cyclops immediately, because they knew that James Marsden had no availability, because he'd actually gone with Singer to work on Superman Returns. He was cast in Superman Returns. So the studio's original plan was to have his death happen completely off screen and just be covered in dialogue. So someone was going to be like, oh yeah, and Scott died. Do you remember last summer when that attack happened and Scott died? Yeah, sad that.
God, that would have been horrendous, to be fair.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And again, to Kinberg and Penn's credit, Zach Penn, the other writer, they insisted to bring him in and have Gene kill him, because they thought that was at least the best way they could dramatize his death, or the best way they could squeeze some story out of it. They didn't end up doing that, but that was on paper. That's the correct idea. The studio's choice and insistence on rushing the film into production. Oh, it's worth noting, by the way, that decision to rush the film into production and make sure it came out the next year and have that fixed release date If they'd have just laxed on that, they could have had Marsden. Wouldn't have been a problem. And the same goes for Mystique, because actress Rebecca Romijn had scheduling conflicts also, which is why she gets such a fucking short role in this movie. Same thing with Rogue. The reason she disappears to go take the mutant cure and doesn't have any role in the film's final act was because of Anna Paquin's limited availability. She was in the midst of shooting a movie called The Squid and the Whale, which was obviously the biggest movie
Classic.
of the biggest movie of the year. Smart choice. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. I've never seen that movie. Maybe it's a masterpiece. Who knows? But yeah, she was doing that at the same time as this movie. So, like, she couldn't do it either. So all of these actors were not in the movie because the studio's insistence on shooting it when they wanted to shoot it. Now, some of the other actors that don't get too much time in this are for different reasons. So Xavier's death was just was again the studio's idea.
Can I interrupt you a second? Sorry.
Yes.
The Squid and the Whale has 91% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Right, yeah, which is exactly
and
why
an 81%,
yeah.
and an 81% audience score. No, I've never heard of this movie, but it's got Jeff Daniels. It won awards at Sundance. Like,
great. It's on Netflix. Fucking
hell!
It's on Netflix. According to
it won awards. It won awards. It won awards for Best Dramatic Direction and Screenwriting. It was nominated for the Grand Jury Prize.
Oh, Christ. It's directed by Noah Baumbach. Okay, yeah, that's like a prestige thing then. Okay, no wonder she chose to do that over this. It's written by Wes Anderson and Noah Baumbach. Christ.
It received 6 Independent Spirit Awards and 3 Golden Globes nominations, but yes.
Well, this is why when we make cynical jokes, we always add the proviso, which I did, of, oh, I'm kidding, maybe it's a masterpiece. I covered my ass.
This isn't me going, you're wrong, haha, Dan. This is me going, fucking hell, this film
might be worth watching.
Looks impressive.
Yeah.
Mate, it was shot on a Super 16, mostly using a handheld camera.
So here's the lesson. We're not recommending X-Men: The Last Stand, but we are recommending The Squid and the Whale.
Apparently so. Yeah.
So the choice to kill off Professor X was the studio's idea. Also, one of the 1,000 ways they ruined this movie.
Sorry, mate. Can I give you one other like mind blowing? I'll give you. I want you to say, let's trivia it up, and I'll give you a bit of like fucking amazing trivia for this movie.
Okay, let's trivia it up.
So, as you've just said, the film was directed by Noah Baumbach, yeah?
Yes.
Or Baumbach,
yes.
I'm probably saying his name wrong.
Is it called Marriage Story? Was that the movie he did? That was the one with Scarlett Johansson that was pretty good? Good movie.
Marriage Story is the name of that movie, yes. I think it's him. Hold on. Yeah, it's him.
Yeah. Great movie.
Right. So the film is The Squid and the Whale.
Mm-hmm.
He's Noah. The English indie folk band Noah and the Whale takes their name from a combination of the director's name and the film's title.
Oh, of course. Noah Baumbach and then The Squid and the Whale.
And then the whale. That's mad. Anyway,
did we just completely miss a cultural touchstone and we need to watch this movie? Is that...
I don't know. It seems like we... Well, I don't know if it was a cultural touchstone, but it certainly seems like it was very much a prestige movie.
Incredible. Well, there you go. That's incredible. That's good stuff. Where was I up to? The writing in the movie. I've lost my place in my notes because I clicked away because I'm an idiot. This is my fault. Give me 2 seconds. Oh yeah, here we go.
No, that's my fault. I very much took us off on a Squid and the Whale tangent. Then that's my fault.
I know, but I should have not touched my computer at all. I should have left it right on the note I was on. So I've for the third time and hopefully the final time. Professor X's death was the studio's idea. They felt it would have the impact of Spock's death in Wrath of Khan. They felt the script needed a dramatic turn. Right. Let the writers do the writing, studio executives. I don't know what the fuck you're doing, but, like, bad studio. They also gave the writers a lot of restrictions on which characters could be in the film because they were simultaneously developing X-Men Origins Wolverine. Shocker that the same executives involved in that shit show made this movie. I hope they all got fired. So characters like Gambit were off the table as a result. Although, in Gambit's case specifically, actually, to be fair, the writers have expressed that they didn't feel there was much room for Gambit in their script. As is becoming tradition with these movies, Gambit did have a plan to be in this movie. This is the third of these movies we've done, and there has been a Gambit was almost in this movie story for all of them. The plan was for Gambit to appear as a love interest for Rogue and a rival for Iceman, similar to how Kitty Pryde is Rogue's rival for Iceman's affections. So it would become a square, a love square. There'd be four of them involved. The movie couldn't have held that, I don't think. And that is why the writers have sort of said it didn't really matter that they weren't allowed to use Gambit, because they didn't think there was much room for him in the script. They kind of considered it a good thing that they couldn't use him in the end. I agree, if I'm being honest. Would have further muddled a muddled movie. Alan Cumming.
Yeah, I agree.
Alan Cumming did not enjoy the process of becoming Nightcrawler, but the studio still wanted to use the character in this one, initially at least. But in the end, his role in the script was so minimal they didn't think it was worth the effort and cut the character. So there you go. They actually decided to explain away Nightcrawler's explain his lack of appearance in this movie in the X-Men official game from 2006, which apparently has dialogue that explains that Nightcrawler left the X-Men because he didn't appreciate their life of action and violence, which does fit. Would have been nice if it was mentioned in the fucking movie, but okay, fine. Kinberg told If magazine in 2006 that he felt there wasn't much left to do with the Nightcrawler character. It also felt like he might tread a little bit on the terrain of Beast in terms of similarities in the characters and their political standpoints, and in terms of dealing with their mutancy. So that's one of the reasons they didn't end up including Nightcrawler so much in their script. The scenes of young Angel trying to hack off his wings is actually one of the few legacy ideas from Matthew Vaughn's time, 2 months on the project. Makes sense. It's a good scene.
Yes, I was going to say it's one of the better scenes.
Yeah,
I assume another one is Wolverine talking to Rogue.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, Chris. Would not surprise me.
Not,
I don't know that, but would not surprise me. When Ratner came on, they were about 2 months until production started, so he didn't have a huge amount of time to have an impact on the script. But actually, I should clarify. On the commentary to the film, this has been sort of spun as a positive by Ratner. Apparently, he sort of said he wasn't hugely familiar with the X-Men, so it meant he could fully just trust the writers to be true to the comics because they were more familiar. That sounds like him excusing not having the time to work on this script himself, and therefore washing his hands of the content to me. Don't blame me, blame the writers! They're the ones. They knew. But with that in mind, he did make some changes during his 2 months of pre-production. So he reworked the structure a little bit, because basically the Golden Gate Bridge sequence was originally in the middle of the movie as an excuse for Magneto to gain his army. So he was going to break mutants out of Alcatraz that had become a mutant prison for ones that people had deemed too dangerous. So they'd march into on the lab later in the movie in Washington. And that was the climax. So Ratner said, why don't we just put the laboratory on Alcatraz so the bridge sequence can be our lead into the third act, and then, you know, we can give him another excuse for getting an army in the middle of the movie, which is why that kind of feels like it comes out of nowhere, where he just like goes to this place where there's hundreds of mutants hanging out and is like, join me, and they're like, okay. That's why that scene now exists. So it's fine. Ratner was also the reason they created a face for the cure, and that's how Leech got introduced to the script. So Leech and the face for the cure, the reason that feels undercooked and like it doesn't 100% work is because it was added to the script about a month or two before production started. Hence why it's not embedded into anything. Well, let's move off the script. We're nearly there, Chris, because that was most of the stuff.
Just quickly on that.
Sure.
Do you think there's a world, and I think there is, given the mess of the rest of the movie, do you think there's a world where they could have just been like, yeah, we've got a cure, and not really explained it?
Yeah, 100%.
They've not really explained it. Yeah, I think there is as well.
Yeah, I think, honestly, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. Because the point isn't that they've made it. The point is how they are going to use it. Like the movie does a couple of plots about like, well, wait a minute, we're not going to have a choice in this. They're going to do this. Is like, you know, it's unfathomable to think that if they've got this power, they're going to misuse this power. You know, they're going to take the power off mutants that don't deserve to have the power taken off them because they've deemed them dangerous. You know, that's the drama of this story. I don't care where the cure comes from.
You know what they could have done? They could have explained it away with a line. They could have explained it away with a line. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
After Magneto got arrested after the events of New York, we seized all his technology and machine to turn people into mutants and reversed it.
There you go. Perfect. I mean, I wouldn't have even needed that, but like that's perfect. That's fine. Does it in a line. You know where the technology came from. You don't need to worry about it. Yeah, bad choice. Anyway, so some last notes on casting before we get into production. Summer Glau auditioned for the role of Kitty Pryde. Now, obviously, she worked on Firefly and Serenity in the role of River, and she actually turned to Joss Whedon for advice because she knew he was a big X-Men fan. She was unaware he had written the very issues of Astonishing X-Men this script was kind of based on, and in fact, the audition script turned out to be taken. So what she auditioned with was material written by Whedon for the 5th issue of his Gifted run.
Amazing.
Brilliant. Another Whedon alumni auditioned for the role of Kitty Pryde. That's Eliza Dushku, who's great, by the way. Big fan of Eliza Dushku. Would have been a good Kitty Pryde. I like Elliot Page. I'm glad we got that choice. I ain't portal gunning into that reality, but if that had happened, I would have been okay with that. Same with Summer Glau, also a very talented actress. No problem. Before they landed on Elliot Page, would you believe this, Chris? Maggie Grace was cast as Kitty Pryde. But but the filmmakers ultimately decided that she was a little too old for the role because they wanted her to be sort of school age.
Yeah, it would have been fine as a choice, though.
Yeah, I like Maggie Grace. Brett Ratner cast Elliot Page as Kitty Pryde after seeing him in Hard Candy. Page initially turned down the role, but Ratner personally called with the script, and they finally agreed to do the role. So there you go. That's how that happened. If you haven't seen, listeners, the movie Hard Candy, it's excellent. Well worth your time. So watch that and The Squid and the Whale.
Yeah, I was going to say, no Squid and the Whale, Dan, but all right.
So apparently Jason Fleming was considered for the role of Beast, presumably around the time Matthew Vaughn was looking to sort the movie out. Obviously, Matthew Vaughn was the one who ultimately cast Kelsey Grammer. Presumably, this is why Vaughn then brought in Jason Fleming to play Azazel in First Class. So he did eventually get Jason Fleming into an X-Men movie. So top work. As mentioned previously, the production began in August 2005 and wrapped in January 2006 with the release date of, I think was it May? And like the sort of X2 film, it was shot in Vancouver. And to Ratner's credit, he got the movie over the line. He may have been a director gun for hire, but he did. Look, it happened. The movie got made on the schedule that they wanted it to. The studio, that is. And because the schedule was so tight, footage was actually being sent to editors as it was shot. There wasn't a post-production process that began once production ended. Two things were happening simultaneously. Apparently, Ratner told Post magazine in 2006 that post-production began the day I started shooting. So there you go.
Jeez, that's mad.
I know. On the note of the production, the whirlwind wire stunt performed by Halle Berry, where she span around as she flew up into the air and then came down on the house, made her so nauseated she vomited in one take, and the crew had to bring buckets for her to shoot her fight scenes while she was doing the wire work. That's cruel. If she's that sick, get a stunt actor to do it.
Yeah.
Someone who can handle the G's.
This trilogy of movies and what they put everyone through is just...
I know. And here, so now we have to hit the bad thing. So I'll briefly do this one. We did so much on Bryan Singer, and I'm not equating the two. No one should equate the two. But Brett Ratner, not the best guy either. But I don't want this podcast to be 20 minutes of dissecting Brett Ratner's homophobia, but multiple people have reported, but particularly from an interview in 2017, Elliot Page said, he accused Ratner of homophobia, basically. Said he outed Page as a lesbian at cast and crew meet and greet during production, which made him feel violated, but also co-star and bisexual actress Anna Paquin, expressed support of Page, stated that she was present when Ratner made these comments, and there have been multiple accusations over the years of Ratner being homophobic. This is awful. Put him in a bin. Just put him in a bin. And like, unlike with Bryan Singer, where I'm like, made really good stuff, what a shame, Brett Ratner can go in a bin. I don't think history's much different movie-wise. We don't get Rush Hour, I guess, which I enjoyed as a kid, but I bet doesn't hold up. So put him in a bin. That's fine. We don't need Tower Heist as a movie in our lives.
Just I've got a real soft spot for Tower Heist, but yeah, I do agree with your comments. It's not worth that.
Yeah, that's fair. So according to visual effects supervisor John,
I think I've seen Tower Heist like 3 times. I've seen that movie a ridiculous number of times.
Why?
I don't know. I like heist movies, and there's so many amazing ones I've not seen. I've not seen Widows, but I've seen Tower Heist 3 times.
Tower Heist sucked. Oh man,
Have you seen it?
You're funny.
Have you seen it?
Yeah, so mate, I saw that in the cinema.
Oh wow, yeah, I mean, it does suck, but yeah, wow, you saw it in the cinema. God,
I know. I don't know what I was doing. But, like, when you take Brett Ratner out of movie history, you don't get the Rush Hour movies, which is a shame, because, I enjoyed those as a kid. But otherwise, it's like Red Dragon, famous piece of shit. Like, what was it? Movie 43, famous piece of shit. Hercules, famous piece of shit. Like, this
movie for... I want to do movie 43 one day on here, because, like... just how that film happened.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
What the fuck went down is madness. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, like, I just think, like, the world isn't going to be significantly worse without a Brett Ratner. In terms of his career. I'm not saying wipe the man off the face of the planet. But, like, I don't, yeah. Fucking people with bullshit, bigoted views shouldn't be working in like these sort of fields, in my opinion. And I do feel for the cast, who probably will have been excited to work on this movie, happy they'd gotten rid of Singer, and to then walk into homophobia is not fun. So yeah, no, fuck that guy. Brett the Rat Ratner continues to be a rat. Right. According to visual effects supervisor John Bruno, about 35 million, which is 1/6 of the budget, was spent on the Golden Gate Bridge sequence. This included constructing a full-scale section of the bridge that was about the size of a basketball court, 94 feet, and then using the computer graphics to build the rest of the bridge and the background. Now, it's because they weren't allowed to shoot on the real bridge. They did ask, and apparently they were just like, the Golden Gate Bridge is in, San Francisco? So whoever the local authority there were just like, no, you cannot shoot on the bridge. We need the bridge. It's how people go places.
Fair point.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah. Don't see any problem with that. So earlier we complimented the restraint because they removed the Kitty Pryde Bobby Drake kiss. Yeah. So initially the skady scene, as we mentioned, had and then ended on them kissing and then being spied on by Rogue. But Brett Ratner cut that part out, apparently. He was the person who chose that. Primarily, though, so he did the right thing for the wrong reason, because primarily he thought that 18-year-old Elliot Page looks like a 12-year-old, as he puts it on the DVD commentary, making the whole thing feel improper.
Jesus.
Now, look.
Fucking hell.
Now, I do understand that one of the things that made Elliot Page able to play very young characters for a very long time was they do look a lot younger than they are. That has been a feature of their physique for a long time, right? I do get that. They were way older than Juno when they played Juno. They were way older than the character playing in Hard Candy in that. So I understand. But to not put the kiss in because it didn't look right when... they were 18 at the time, and probably arguably older than the character was supposed to be. It's unclear, actually. I'm not sure how old Bobby Drake is supposed to be in this movie. It's fucking bizarre. Now, look, wrong reason, right choice. I still agree with taking the kiss out. for story and character reasons. But that is fucking bizarre. But also a bit rude, I think, to Elliot Page, because they said it on the commentary that they look like a 12-year-old.
Yeah, it's fucking horrendous.
Just all sorts of fucked up. Clearly not happy with Elliot Page. Go fuck yourself, Bret Ratner. Anyway, the maneuver where Colossus grabs Wolverine and throws him at something by spinning him around a few times is known as the fastball special, and it is an iconic move in the X-Men comics, TV shows, just X-Men stuff in general. Based on John Cassidy's X-Men number 6, or Amazing X-Men number 6. Apparently that might be where it first appeared, but it is a recurring move that the X-Men have done over the years. Someone has launched Wolverine at a Sentinel or whatever. So when Famke Janssen was cast as the role as Jean Grey, she was excited at the prospect of doing the Dark Phoenix storyline. It will not shock you, Chris, to discover that in multiple interviews since this movie came out, she was not happy with the way it was depicted.
Yeah, no, that doesn't shock me at all, Dan.
No, doesn't shock me either. Cyclops appears in the movie for a total of 4 minutes and 40 seconds. I love that someone timed it. Excellent work. Just excellent fucking work. So the last scenes of Magneto and Professor X that were added, Professor X not really, but the two post-credit scenes, so Magneto discovering the return of his powers and Professor X sort of being still alive, were not in the script. They were secretly filmed. So Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart didn't even know whether the scenes would make it to the final cut or not. So for those who don't remember, the Magneto one is just him on the bench playing thing, and then he uses his powers to nudge the chess piece or whatever. The Patrick Stewart one is weirder, but they do set it up earlier in the movie. So earlier in the movie, he's like, would it be moral for a mutant to put their brain inside of a comatose patient? He's sort of saying that in a class. And then the end of the movie, Moira McTaggart, who is a doctor in this incarnation, rather than a CIA agent that we meet in First Class, played by Rose Byrne. Whatever. They took a name from a comic. It's Moira McTaggart in name only because they went, oh, that's a character from X-Men. People will recognize, I guess. But basically, Moira McTaggart has a coma patient with her, and in sort of almost a Professor X-y voice, that character goes, Moira! You know, the same way he usually goes, Logan! Same sort of tone, but more deathly. But yeah, so both those scenes were not in the script, shot last minute, just sort of to give them the options when they wanted to come back to bring Magneto and Professor X back again. They're fine, but yeah, whatever. I'm sort of glad they exist, because it does mean you can keep it on, but also they never got to it. Neither of those things ever really came to anything. Who cares? Timeline gets reset in a couple of movies anyway.
I might be wrong, but my memory of X-Men days... So my memory is there's a post-credit scene, which I haven't seen the movie, but I've seen the post-credit scene of the Wolverine, where they're in the airport and they're just, back. And my memory is Days of Future Past then doesn't bother explaining how Professor X
so
is
it
alive.
does. So that okay, it doesn't. It doesn't really make sense. It doesn't really work. But basically, because the timelines get a bit fucked up when you start doing First Class versus what's in these movies, there's loads of contradictions. So what they do in Days of Future Past is they quote-unquote reset the timeline. So the timeline post Days of Future Past is a different timeline to this timeline.
Yeah, that, at the end, but at the how's he alive at the beginning of the movie? That's what I'm asking. Do they explain it then?
Oh, no, probably not. No, I don't think they do. But like I said, look, there's a really funny video people should watch from the Weekly Planet called it's something like the X-Men timeline doesn't make any sense, and they just go through it and try to piece it together, and it just doesn't happen. Doesn't function. So their rule of thumb is no X-Men movie is beholden to anything but the previous one in terms of its canon.
Yeah, fair. Yeah.
They only ever seem to honour what happened in the most recent movie. So, yeah. It's a mess. No, you're right. They don't explain that, I don't think. He's just back. Maybe that's a different timeline too. Who the fuck knows? Anyway. So the movie was budgeted at $2 $210 million, which at the time was the most expensive movie ever made, surpassing King Kong from the year before, which cost 207. I always find that funny because it's like 207, then followed by 210. It's like they went, give them 2 million more. Do it. Give them just 3 million more. Just round it up. We'll win. It's like, feels like they only wanted that headline. Or it might have just been coincidence. But really hilariously, despite that, it only held the record for 5 weeks, Chris. Because then Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest came out with a $225 million budget.
That just sums up this movie.
Yeah, it really does.
It really does.
Yeah, it really does. So at the time of release, it was the most financially successful of the X-Men movies. I actually would question that because profit's hard to judge because obviously this movie they spent a lot on it. So, okay, if we're just going on pure box office, right, it was the 7th highest grossing movie of 2006, and it made $460 million worldwide, right, which is a lot of money, but on a $210 million budget. Plus another, $100 million for marketing? Do you know what I mean? It's pretty... Yeah. I think that's spurious. Whereas, what did the first X-Men movie do? 1 second. First X-Men movie... Oh, damn. It's not written down on this. 1 second. I recently updated my Tale of the Tape document. Here it is. So... Yeah, so the first one made... Yeah, a bigger profit than this one. Like a bigger percentage profit. Times its budget, it made nearly 4 times its budget. This movie only made 2 times its budget. So, yeah, in raw numbers, it made a bigger number. You know, the first movie made just shy of 300 million. This one made 460. But because of how much more was spent on this one, from a budget of 75 to a budget of 210, it kind of just loses its lead, if that makes sense, in my opinion. So I wouldn't consider this the most financially successful X-Men movie, personally, of those original 3. But hey-ho. In a 2009 interview, Bryan Singer admitted he regretted declining doing this movie. Confessed he realised his mistake before I was watching it, during watching it, and after watching it. I don't like Bryan Singer, but that's pretty funny. There's an interview out there where he talked about how he would have done it differently. It was in the trivia. I didn't include it because, like, it didn't happen. And look, it's all talk, isn't it? Like, who knows what that movie would have been like? So I didn't include it for time. But if you want to Google it, you can find out. He talked about what he would have done. 2 last bits of trivia. It's everyone's favourite segment. It's Cars Exist. So, the automobile, and this is... Oh, I'm reading this exactly as it's written on IMDb, because I got this one from IMDb, and I fucking love it. Whoever wrote this, I love you. The automobile Professor X and Eric Lancer used in the beginning of this movie is a Mercedes-Benz 600. Not the car, the automobile. So I really should have said, automobiles exist.
It's still the same noise, isn't it?
And then, everyone's favourite, glasses exist. Click. I don't know, yeah. Cyclops, once again, had Oakley's. They were a modified Oakley's Penny model, a limited edition sunglasses, with a custom tint created specifically for the movie. But that wasn't the only character that got supplied Oakley's for this film. Hank McCoy wears Oakley Y3 glasses, specifically made to sort of fit the character and his rather large blue head.
Nice. That's good. That's good glasses facts.
Good glasses, Trev. And obviously we talked about this in a previous movie, but just for anyone who didn't hear those, as a result, James Marsden has a lifetime supply of Oakleys. I
really thought you were going to give the Daniel Radcliffe fact then.
Oh, I could have done. Yeah. No, I didn't. No, but so for those, don't remember that. A lifetime supply of Oakleys for James Marsden forever. So if you ever see him not wearing Oakleys, he fucked up.
Yeah. Something went wrong.
Yeah, right. So there we go. I mean, look, it's a bad movie. Sorry, everyone. I don't know what to tell you.
How do you feel about the trilogy as a whole, then?
Oh, that's a good question, isn't it? It's uneven, I would say. I think it's great, close to being good, but stumbles at the finish line and the fucking mess. So it really is like it's proper Goldilocks. Like this one's too shit. This one's not too good. No, it doesn't really make any sense. My point is, it's a real mixed bag. I don't know. How are you feeling about it? Are you just feeling like they stumbled at the very end? Is in the third one, and the other ones are fine. Like what's your conclusion?
No, X2 has flaws, and I really liked X-Men. I really liked it. Would I? I wouldn't hold it as high esteem as, say, Spider-Man. So, excuse me, my throat made a weird noise then. But I enjoy these movies. I think I sort of feel the way I've always felt on these movies, which are like, yeah, fine. Do you know what I mean? If someone's like, if you and I are hanging out when we've been hanging out for a couple of days, we've ran out of shit to say to each other, and you go, I really fancy watching an X-Men movie. I'd be like, yeah, okay. Do you know what I mean? But I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I came into this going, just now I'm going to do a rewatch of the whole thing, and now I'm like, yeah, we probably won't. Like, do you know what I mean? Whereas, if I want to rewatch Tower Heist, I rewatch Tower Heist. So,
yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, it's interesting.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not every couple of years I'm going to rewatch Die Hard. Every couple of years there's certain franchises. If I've not watched Back to the Future in a couple of years, I'm watching Back to the Future, Whereas the X-Men movies are never going to be that for me. And I would be more inclined to rewatch the MCU than the X-Men movies.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean they're bad. That doesn't mean there's not merit. They're just so up and down. Mm-hmm. They're so real highs of, X-Men, X2 for a lot of people, Days of Future Past for a lot of people, First Class, Logan. Obviously, Logan's a fucking masterpiece, and if we include the Deadpool movies, we got a masterpiece in there too. And then, but for that, there's Apocalypse. So yeah, it's almost just a bit too uneven.
Yeah, no, I would agree. So, Chris, do you want to know?
Yes, I'm very intrigued. Where are we going next, Daniel?
So I had a few options for this. I had a movie that I don't think you've ever seen, but I was like, I just think this is going to be one of those. I loved it as a kid, but it doesn't hold up movies. I watched the trailer and I was like, maybe this would be good still. Maybe this is still fun, but I'll save that in my back pocket. The other one was, for the second time, I did consider, we nearly did it instead of Speed earlier this year, Face Off, I considered. Not the movie I've landed on. In the end, I thought we did a load of shit movies this season, like a high amount, and I want to choose a movie I know I'm still going to enjoy. I'm not sure you will, because you have referenced this movie in the past not being a favourite of yours, but I'll be curious to discuss it more formally, Chris. So we are tackling the classic that is Ghostbusters. I'm pulling the trigger. Now, for those who don't know, just a little tease, Chris often cites this movie as an example of if you saw it as a kid, you love it as an adult, but I missed it as a kid and have watched it as an adult and didn't love it. I will be curious to see if that holds up on a more critical viewing.
Me too, definitely.
So yeah, we're going to do Ghostbusters next time. It'll be the first episode of the next season. It's going to be, 10 weeks, 11 weeks between now and then, whatever the usual gap is. For listeners, not for us. We're probably going to start recording them pretty soon. but for listeners, there's that's the gap. Yeah, I'm excited about doing it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, me too. That's very exciting. I share exactly what you just said. Your intrigue about whether that's still my stance.
Yes. Yeah, because you sort of saw it with friends, and like it was it's a very casual situation. Like I wonder if with a bit more analysis, you might come out with me that either more of an appreciation for it, or it'll just reaffirm your existing feelings on it, which is totally plausible as well. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, but since then I have enjoyed. I did enjoy Afterlife. I thought Frozen Empire was a bit of a mess, but I enjoyed Afterlife, and I enjoyed the 2016 one or whenever it was. I'm a big defender of that movie.
No, me too. I think that movie is way better than anyone gives it credit for. 100%. It's a good fun time. It's not. It doesn't lean into the thing that makes Ghostbusters, I think, interesting. But as just an isolated movie, I think it's really, really funny and like and full of like. It's a really good popcorn movie. That 2016 one. I also defend that movie. I think it's fun. I do understand why fans don't like it though. But we haven't talked about this too much. But like it does sort of not really lean into the most interesting thing about the premise of Ghostbusters for me. But we'll come to that when we review the first Ghostbusters, because in my opinion, the first Ghostbusters might be the only movie in the franchise that understands what's funny about the premise and interesting about the premise. So we'll do it.
Yes.
We'll cover it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll leave you on that little cliffhanger, and we'll see you guys in 10, 11 weeks for another one of these. Thank you for listening through, especially if you listen to the whole series or a bunch of these this year. We appreciate it. We'll be back for more.
And and I'll say this: or shall I? Hold on. No. I'll say this. For anyone thinking, well, what are they doing in between? We'll explain that in 11 weeks' time. We'll explain why there's nothing in between. Then. Yeah,
but I mean, look, this has already been discussed on our Discord. But like, the reality is, we've done a weekly podcast on top of our bi-weekly podcast.
Yeah.
For 6 years straight.
Yeah.
Without a break.
Yeah.
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 Fuck it.
We've had 6 podcasts, if at minimum 6 podcasts, going out every month for 6 years.
Yeah. So we've put out 6 episodes a month for 6 years. It's a lot. Like,
and even when there's been gaps in saying nothing but static, because there's also been a load of extra shit over the years. I would have thought if you did the average, it would still average 6 a month.
I agree. So it's fine. It's not a problem.
Yeah. That's fair. Cool
Indeed. All right. Thanks everyone for listening. We
Sweet.
will see you at some other point.
For those going, oh, they're not coming back for 11 years. I mean, I can't imagine anyone falls into this category. But if anyone's listening to this but doesn't listen to Nothing But Static, which again, I think it's more likely to be the other way round based on figures. But Nothing But Static is still airing, so you can hear our thoughts on new TV, old TV. You can TV news. So check us out there.
Yeah, do indeed. All right, cool. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you in 11 weeks.
Yeah. My name's Chris Billingham.
My name's Dan Doohan.
And this review has been Rewound.